Good evening and welcome to the Ogden City Council meeting of June 13th, 2017. This is the 6 p.m. special City Council meeting. Please note that all council members are present tonight. With that, I'll turn the time over to Vice Chair Heyer for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes, thank you, Chair White. Tonight it will be our pleasure to have Councilmember Garner lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Would the audience please rise and we'll repeat the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Please take a moment of silence with me. Thank you. Next on our agenda is a recognition, and I am going to turn the time over to Councilmember Blair to read the proclamation.
Thank you, Chair White. This is a joint proclamation of the Ogden City Council and Mayor declaring June 17th, 2017, Juneteenth Freedom Day in Ogden City, and it reads, whereas Juneteenth is the oldest known celebration commemorating the abolition of slavery in the United States and the emancipation of African American slaves throughout the Confederate South, Union soldiers landed at Galveston, Texas on June 19, 1865, with news that the war had ended and the enslaved were now free, more than 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was issued on January 1, 1863. Until that day, slavery had been relatively unaffected in Texas by the Emancipation Proclamation, and Texas had even been viewed as a safe haven for slave owners to relocate with their slaves because the state experienced no large-scale fighting or significant presence of Union troops. And whereas, on that first Juneteenth, a name that combines June and the 19th, the people of Texas were read General Order Number 3, which stated, the people of Texas are informed that in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and free laborer. The Juneteenth announcement was met with jubilation that spread throughout the country as African Americans relocated to neighboring states and became reacquainted with family. And whereas the first Juneteenth celebration was a time for reassurance, prayer, and the gathering of family members, Juneteenth continued to be widely observed in Texas decades later, with many former slaves and descendants making an annual pilgrimage back to Galveston. Juneteenth today continues to grow within communities and organizations throughout the country. Numerous local and national Juneteenth organizations have arisen alongside older organizations with the common mission of promoting and cultivating knowledge and appreciation of African American history and culture, while encouraging continuous self-development and respect for all people and cultures. And whereas during the 2016 legislative session, Utah became the 45th state in the nation to have an official state observance of Juneteenth Freedom Day, which will be commemorated annually in Utah on the third Saturday in June. The Juneteenth commemoration has been observed in Utah as a community freedom festival for more than 75 years by various communities. Now therefore be it resolved that the Ogden City Council and Mayor Michael P. Caldwell hereby proclaim June 17, 2017, Juneteenth Freedom Day in Ogden City. We encourage residents, schools, businesses, and community groups to celebrate Juneteenth as a day of remembrance and celebration. We appreciate the significant efforts of those in our community and our Utah State representatives to make this special holiday an official state observance. And with that, I will go ahead and make a motion that we pass this joint proclamation.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Blair, second by Councilmember Stevens. This is a voice vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, that passes.
So now we have Betty Sawyer here who is the Director of Project Success and also the Juneteenth Commission Chair. So she's here tonight to receive this
All
resolution.
right, come on up.
This proclamation.
Bring my friends with me.
Absolutely.
Come on, friends. Some of our Juneteenth commissions. Thank you. Thank you so much. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Betty. We need to have some kind of a procession going here.
Really, thank you so much. Thank you.
Pictures?
We're going to take a picture, so kind of line up right in here.
Right here.
Yeah.
Right here. Put one on your other side. Stay right here. Yeah, like that, just perfect.
Got us all? That was two.
Thank you.
Brittany takes 15, by the way.
So let's do it. Good evening, everyone. This is pretty exciting. As you know, this year will be our 28th statewide celebration, and we were fortunate enough to be able to bring this celebration to Ogden 28 years ago. And we've been welcomed here, we've been supported here, and so tonight makes that all the better to be able to continue this partnership and provide an opportunity for all of us to learn and grow together. As you stated in the proclamation, it was about freedom and equality, and those are the things that we still continue to pursue today as we work on issues around education, employment, business development, all of those things with an eye to constantly improve the living conditions and quality of life for all peoples in our community and throughout our state. We're especially excited about this year's celebration in that Friday night we're going to have a town hall meeting. And in that meeting, it's going to be at the Davis campus of Weber State University, one of our partners. And we're going to talk about the state of blacks in Utah and work toward developing a strategic plan of action so that we can work together and you can work with us as we tackle some of the challenges that we have and build upon the positives that are in our communities and our families. So you're definitely welcome to come out at 6:30 p.m. for that. A few years ago, we added a Mr. and Miss Juneteenth pageant. We're always looking on how we can engage our young people in this celebration and help them to learn and embrace their own history and culture. So that'll be going on as well. As you know, this year we've spread out because of the state holiday to do an event in Salt Lake as well. And so that'll be on Saturday, and Sunday we'll be at the Ogden City Amphitheater. So we invite you all to come out where you can, spend a little time with us, and just, again, work with us as we embrace our history and culture and work on reconciliation, healing, and all of the work that is before us all. Again, thank you so much for your support and for our wonderful committee, for all the hard work they've done. And most of them have been with me for 28 years, except for this young one on the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. I just have a comment really quick, and I appreciate you always addressing us with a smile and applying that pressure just ever so, and so I appreciate how you are opening our eyes up as well, so thank you.
And I forgot one thing, isn't it budget time? How did that slip my mind? You know, I just consider putting a little something on your base budget for Juneteenth for every year for the holiday and all the wonderful things to keep this in Ogden, right?
Right. Right.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Just really quick to clarify, it's this Saturday and Sunday?
Yes, this weekend, traditionally Father's Day weekend. And we'll do something special for all the dads out there, so come on out.
Fantastic. Thank you. We also have another recognition, not actually given by us. So I think, is Sherry here? Is that, or Lisa, please, sorry. Thank you.
Real quickly, the Government Finance Officers Award for Excellence in Budgeting. There's multiple pages of things that have to be in that budget document for us to obtain this award. Although it comes through our office, it's a city effort. It really requires the administration, the council, all of us working together to not only make it a numbers document, but a communication tool and a policy document. Sherry Garrett with the Utah Government Finance Officers Association Board is here this evening. She is the finance manager for Washington Terrace, and so we're grateful for her to be here and share her time with us.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you. It's good to be back. I came last year, and I'm excited to be back again to give you good news this year. Thank you, Lisa, for that introduction. As she mentioned, I'm with the Utah Government Finance Officers Association, and I am honored to be here. The Distinguished Budget Award is what you have been received, and I'm going to go through that a little bit with you. It was given by the Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada, otherwise known as the GFOA. I want to share with you just a little bit of background about this prestigious award for you all, and of course the members of the audience as well. The GFOA is a professional association serving approximately 19,000 government finance professionals across the United States and Canada. The GFOA established the only national awards program in governmental budgeting to encourage and assist state and local governments in preparing the highest quality budget documents. It reflects the highest principles of governmental budgeting as we know today. These guidelines have been established by the National Advisory Council on State and Local Budgeting, and of course, best practices. You probably hear a lot about best practices. This program has been significant in improving the public sector budgeting and enabling governments of all sizes to provide to its citizens with the highest quality budget documents that are clear, understandable, easy to read, which you probably have noticed, and complete, comprehensive. Your budget document was reviewed by several governmental budgeting professionals. These professionals have assessed your budget document in several different areas, as Lisa just mentioned. They look to see how well it serves as a policy document, a financial plan, operations guide, and of course a communications device. Your document received not only was it proficient, but it also had outstanding measures in many of those areas. So that's to be applauded. Moving along, I wanted to just recognize Ogden City and the leadership that you have here for adhering to the highest level of budgeting standards. It's actually quite unique. It's a strong commitment to excellence, hard work, dedication to the highest professional standards. This goes far above and beyond what is required by state statute and state law. And not many cities and governmental entities adhere to these standards. They're quite rigorous. So this is really a demonstration of Ogden City's commitment to serving its residents. This is the 7th consecutive year that Ogden City has received this award, and the 21st overall time. So you guys have been in it for the long haul. There is only 22 governmental entities in the state of Utah that receive this award. There's 623 governmental entities, only 22 receive it. That's 3.5% of governmental entities that receive this award, so that is significant. Ogden City, for the current year, is in the top 3 entities, governmental entities receiving this award. So again, it just continues to show and demonstrate the city's ongoing willingness to adhere to the highest level standards. With this, I have been asked to give special recognition to the Department of Management Services and the Comptroller's Office, and also recognizing contributions and efforts of the City Council, the Mayor's Office, and administration. Of course, all the departments and divisions that make this document happen. It's a lot of work, a lot of detail that goes into it. The Comptroller staff, specifically Camille Cook for her many, many hours in putting all the details together to make it happen. And finally, I would like to personally recognize Lisa Stout, your comptroller, for all of her efforts under her leadership and her dedication in making this an ongoing success. So thank you all and congratulations. Mayor Caldwell, I have the award if you'd like to receive it. Thank you, and I hope to see you next year.
Sherry? Mayor?
7 years running is a pretty amazing track record for that. And I again would like to thank Lisa, Camille, Brandy, and the entire office. You guys do an amazing job in representing us. And I've long said how we handle the finances of the people here is one of the most important responsibilities we have, and you guys make that a lot easier, and you do phenomenal work. So thank you all very much for your hard work.
Thank you. I just want to thank you for all you do, but one of the lines that she just said, you're not just proficient, but outstanding, and that is true across the board. So thank you very much. Makes our lives easier, that's for sure. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes for the work session of February 28th, 2017. Councilmember Lopez.
Yes, Chair White, I reviewed the minutes and I found them to be accurate.
The work session of March 7th, 2017. Councilmember Stevens.
Yes, Madam Chair, they're correct.
Special meeting of March 14th, 2017. Councilmember Blair.
Yes, thank you, Chair White. I have reviewed those minutes and found them to be correct.
The work sessions of April 25th, 2017. Councilmember Garner.
Yes, Chair White, I've reviewed those minutes, found them to be correct to the best of my recollection, and I make a motion that we approve these minutes.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Garner, second by Councilmember Blair. This is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Those pass. Next on the agenda is a common consent item for the Ogden City Competitive Sports Board.
Chair White, I'll make a motion that we approve common consent.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Nadolski, second by Councilmember Lopez. This is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passes. And new business. We have council rules of procedure and council norms. And Janine, if you would like to present that, what those changes will be.
Thank you, Chair White. This is pretty simple, so hopefully you don't mind if I just do it from the dais here. Council rules of procedure, as you know, outline the council's rules for conducting meetings and addressing other procedural issues. And your norms outline your purpose, vision, goals, and also how we run the day-to-day business. And from time to time, you as council members determine that it's appropriate to update and make changes to these documents. A couple of years ago, we made a change to the documents to provide that a motion was required to open public hearings, and I'll take full credit for that. We thought that it would be a great idea as kind of signal to the audience that it was time for them to address on any specific issue which the council was holding a public hearing. But after doing it for a couple of years, we felt like it wasn't working. You felt like it wasn't working the way it should. That was a little bit awkward, particularly when there's often times when no one is here to speak at the public hearing. So the change that's proposed for you today, and it just happens that it required changes to both documents, is just to remove that requirement for a motion to open a public hearing and just allow the chair to open the public hearing. It would still require a motion to close. So that's the only change. There's just a couple of minor changes in each of the two documents.
Questions for Ms. Ellersmith?
Chair White, I will make a motion that we adopt the proposed resolution 2017-13 to change the rules, procedures, and norms.
We have a motion by Vice Chair Heyer, second by Councilmember Garner to adopt the proposed resolution 2017-13. This is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Blair?
Aye.
Councilmember Garner?
Aye.
Councilmember Lopez?
Aye.
Councilmember Nadolski,
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hyer,
Aye.
Chair White.
Aye, that passes. And it will make this a lot easier. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the reports from the Planning Commission. And that would be Mr. Montgomery.
Chair White?
Actually, sorry, I apologize. Go ahead.
If I may, no, that's okay. So, as all my colleagues know up here, my full-time employer is Weber State University. Not everybody here in the audience may know that. And for that reason, for this particular item, I decided that it's best if I recuse myself from this conversation. So with that, I will be stepping out of the dais and letting you all deal with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Right, sorry.
No problem. Madam Chair, members of the council, tonight you have excuse me, 3 items that are being recommended to you from the Planning Commission. They are items that were petitioned, asking the city to respond to a petition. And in order, they are petition 2016-2, which asks for 2 things to take place, looking at amending the Southeast Ogden Community Plan and also looking at then rezoning property from PI and R16 to R5 conditional overlay. That's generally at the corner of 3850 Harrison Boulevard. A second petition was filed somewhat later, petition 2017-2, which is seeking to amend the zoning text by adding a definition of student housing. So I'd like to be able to just kind of present the Planning Commission's recommendations on those different items. And then I think it would be appropriate to present all 3 and then go ahead and have discussions, whichever you want to have on that. This has been a very frustrating process for the neighborhood because of all the various components that have taken place and the different players throughout this. This timeline looks at the first 2 items we're going to talk about. That is the Southeast Ogden Plan Amendment, which was reviewed by the Planning Commission on May 18th, 2016. And also the rezoning, which has also begun to be looked at on that date. But a final recommendation to you did not occur until February 1st of 2017. The reason for that delay, if you look on this timeline, you notice the lighter yellow color and then kind of the orange color. The lighter yellow color was petitioner, the original petitioner who filed the petition. Up until November 2nd, he was pursuing the project. After November 2nd, a different developer took over that petition and has seen it through to today. And so during that time frame from May to really February, there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of meetings noticed, and a lot of inaction in those meetings because of incomplete information being provided. So in consideration of the Southeast Ogden Community Plan, it was first adopted in 1987. And at the time, the zoning of the area said that a single-family home could allow 5 unrelated people in it. That was the premise of how the plan was developed. It also, at that time, allowed offices in the R4 and the R5 zones. It also looked at the area west of Harrison and north of Weber State and allowed them to have duplexes in those areas. And one of the key issues of that time, of that plan in 1987, was the issue of homes being converted to student housing and how to deal with that conversion taking place and the parking that then occurred when you had the 5 unrelated into a single-family home that only had 2 parking spaces, or if it's a duplex, 10 cars and 4 parking places. Those are the issues back in 1987 when the plan was developed. Of course, throughout time, we always have changes. In 1951, Southeast Ogden looked like this. There was no McCady Hospital. The boundaries were Country Hills Drive as the southern boundary of the city, and I said no McCady Hospital. Since the plan was adopted, the following changes have taken place. In 1985, what had been zoned R5 was zoned to PI, 1992. In 2002, all the duplex zoning, the R2s, was changed to R16, no longer allowing duplexes, new duplexes to be developed in the area. And in 2003, what was zoned PI, the uses in the PI zone changed. So over time, since the plan was developed, these type of changes have been taking place in the southeast Ogden area. I apologize, this is not very readable, but what it's trying to show is the differences that take place between pre-1992 and R5 zoning and what took place after 1992 with the R5 zoning and the PI zone. In a nutshell, the PI zone was intended to replace a lot of the non-residential uses that took place previously in the R5 zone. So all the things such as professional and business offices and clinics and different types of non-residential uses were eliminated from the R5 zone and added into the PI zone when the PI zone now became what an R5 had been. So what also took place in the PI zone was adding housing elements. But come 2003, looking at how the PI zone had been functioning, a lot of those housing elements were removed and the PI zone became more professional and business offices. And a lot of the residential component was removed out of the PI zone. And the reason that took place is what was happening at the PI zone, it was used to try to get a house converted to an office. But because they needed a certain size, they'd zone other properties, but those other properties would never develop. And so the real purpose of the zone was being thwarted. So the city took a look at that and said, no, we've got to revise that and change how it works. And so that started to change some of the standards. So the point of this is what was R5 and what was PI back when the plan was first adopted has changed over time of what those mean. And so even though the plan still talks about those types of zonings, what it means today is completely different from what it meant back in when the plan was adopted. What the Planning Commission looked at in the specific petition was this location shown in red. And two of the properties that are in the darker red are properties that are actually divided by a zone boundary line. The PI zone is along Harrison frontage, and the 3801 Harrison, part of its zone PI, part of its R16. Also, the first home past the duplex on 3850, part of it is zoned PI, and part of it is zoned R16. And by having this zone divide these two lots, it creates an interesting situation of how do they develop. Because according to the present plan, the R5 option exists for half of the property, but not the other half of the property. The request also is looking at then taking the other piece and rezone it. Back in May, when this was first looked at in 2016, this was the concept plan that was submitted for discussion. 130 unit development on 2.3 acres and being 5 stories in height. The commission had a lot of concerns about that concept. The concept changed over time to a concept today, which is 41 units. Doesn't occupy the majority of the lot, but it does have surface parking. It has greater setbacks along the west property lines and buffering to screen the parking from the neighborhood to the west. It's 3 stories tall, 1 story being underground and 3 above ground. And in the most recent proposal, based on some discussions that took place with the hearings, the developer has proposed to reduce the height of the building from 44 feet to 37 feet, which is basically 5 feet shorter than the Harrison Heights from the Brinker side of the development. In looking at the plan amendment, the Planning Commission looked at specifically the concept that if something was to happen here, it should be with a conditional overlay zone. That means that if it were not for a specific type of project, that zoning would not be changed. The conditional overlay zone also allows limitations to then be placed on a development, saying that uses could be restricted. So even though R5 may allow a lot of different uses, the development agreement will say, if not for this specific use, this would not be rezoned. So it's not something that's transferable. Once it's zoned R5, any R5 use could go in there. It has that limitation. It also sets design standards and densities, and if it's not developed, is revocable. So that zoning could be taken back if the project doesn't happen within the year time frame, if it is approved. That's one of the things the Planning Commission felt very important, that any plan amendment have a conditional overlay component to it, that it just doesn't open up to any type of R5 zoning, but it has to be a specific type of project in order to have these other controls because of the nature of being adjacent to neighborhoods, being on Harrison frontage, but have adjacency to neighborhoods behind there. This kind of shows what the R5 zone would allow, 96 units, but the development agreement is saying 41 is the maximum. There is no height restriction in the R5 zone, but the Planning Commission and this idea of development agreement is saying 44 feet would be the maximum height. There is no building material requirement other than it can't be metal, and the development agreement is saying 50% brick. So that's kind of shows you what the development agreement does other than just zoning property R5, then why the CO is important in the Planning Commission's recommendation. Another thing that the Planning Commission said in looking at the plan amendment was concern about traffic flows and disruption of the neighborhood. 2 or 3 times earlier, the 3801 property had been petitioned to be rezoned to allow development to take place, and that would go out to Brinker. And each time the Commission said, we're not going to have access come off Brinker Avenue for this development. And they couldn't get access from the state on Harrison because the state always looks, if you have another option, that's where your property access will be from rather than on the state road, especially at the intersection here. So the Planning Commission, as they looked at this, felt that Brinker limitation is still an important key, because what it does is, if you look at that red dot, if that were the main access off of Brinker, the options of circulating through the neighborhood to either go north and then try to get onto Harrison Boulevard and then go south, or taking a shorter route and going down 3800 and then up 3550 to go north or south, goes through much more of the neighborhood than it would if the access were right off 3850, which is shown in the yellow. So that was one of the stipulations the Planning Commission said should happen in the plan amendment of that limitation. Also, they talked about the building needs to make sure it orients to Harrison Boulevard, because that then acts as a buffering of Harrison Boulevard and the noise from the street, and to create a mass along Harrison Boulevard. If you see in this illustration, the purple showing the building proposed, and you can see how Harrison Heights, the office, and now this would create that buffering and massing along Harrison Boulevard and front along it. And that frontage was one of those key parts. As you see in their proposal, they're proposing an access entrance off of Harrison Boulevard for pedestrians, creating a canopy entryway and putting in that full height of brick in that area and signage to say this is how you get into the building as a pedestrian, and trying to again look at that orientation, which the Planning Commission said would be one of the key things in the plan amendment that should be language there, that projects needs to be oriented to Harrison Boulevard. Another thing the Planning Commission talked about and had recommended to you regarding a plan amendment was that any development should then have all underground parking. That was based on the original proposal, because the recommendation that is to you tonight came in the May 18th, 2016 meeting. And so that was when that was the only proposal, saying, okay, parking being underground would be a key part. What that ended up being in discussions was, if that really is the case, that increased the heights of the building. And is that the best for the neighborhood, is a taller building? And so while the Planning Commission recommendation was in May of 2016, our recommendation to you is that condition should be removed if you consider a plan amendment for the Southeast Ogden plan, because of other options that exist there. So there are two items that are being recommended to you today regarding the plan amendment. That is to amend the map to show an option of R5CO in that area that is red. Now, that doesn't exist along the Harrison frontage because that already has R5 as an option. That is only the properties that are a certain depth back off of Harrison and the three parcels that are being petitioned for rezoning. The other part then is the text amendment, and that text amendment is to the Southeast Ogden Plan also, which basically identifies the properties by address and says that any rezoning consideration should be R5 conditional overlay, that only emergency access should be allowed off Brinker, and the building should orient towards Harrison Boulevard, and that there be heavy landscape setbacks along the Brinker and 3800 and 3850 to, again, buffer any of the parking lot from the neighborhoods. And those are the proposed amendments the Plan Commission is recommending to you on an 8-0 vote to approve as amendment to the Southeast Ogden Community Plan. So that's the first step. That's the first part of the petition. The second part of the petition, as I mentioned, which was then actually recommended to you 8 or 9, well, actually probably 9 months later in February of 2017, was regarding the actual rezoning request. And so in that request, the Planning Commission looked at several factors that are in the general plan. And that is, how do they approach zoning in terms of, there are different land use policies. And some of those policies are, first of all, is it consistent with the community plan? Well, this is based on if the community plan is amended. If the community plan is not amended, then it's not consistent with that. The other part was the policies of lots not being divided by zone boundary lines, the frontages dictating what the zoning should be, not isolating neighborhoods, and providing a transition from higher intensity uses to lower intensity uses. As you can see on this illustration then, the request that the Planning Commission considered was to rezone PI, those front two pieces, to R5CO, and then rezone two other properties fully to R5CO, and the other two properties, which are half divided by the PI zone, to rezone them also to R5CO. So that blue line kind of shows you where those changes would be made. Again, this was the original proposal the Planning Commission looked at back in May, and kind of gives you a massing of what the building would look like and how it would dominate that area as a 5-story structure, and how it occupied the entire site with the building. And then the open space that you see on that, it was actually on the second level. So there was a structure underneath that. That proposal then changed to what the Commission looked at with the site plan on the left and these proposed building elevations on the right, scaling it down to the 41 units. And you can see the landscaping along the western side, and then the parking lot, and then the building, and how that would occupy the full width of the Harrison Boulevard frontage. Since that hearing the Planning Commission made on their recommendation, the developers have submitted another drawing to try to address the issues that they heard at that meeting. One is reducing the height. This drawing reduces the height of the building to 37 feet, which again is, as I mentioned earlier, is 5 feet less than Harrison Heights when viewed from Brinker Avenue. This also allowed then the condenser units, which were all along the north property line, to be put onto the roof and be screened by the parapet walls that would occur along the roof line. One of the key parts as the Commission discussed this after the policies was the development agreement, which is part of a conditional overlay. And in that they said it's very important that we limit the number of units to 41, even though 96 are permitted, and to limit it to the multiple family residential, and not allow the other R5 uses such as daycare, protective housing, treatment facilities, assisted living, nursing homes, transitional housing. Also limit the height to 44 feet, again, in context with other buildings in the area along Harrison Boulevard. Having the fencing moved away so it's set back 20 feet from from a property line so that that area can be landscaped in front to allow buffering, and other site mitigation factors such as how lighting works, that it's buffered so it doesn't go to the residents next door, trash compaction, other types of things. At the meeting, there were also several issues that were discussed over the time frame. So when I say at the meeting, this is at all the different meetings. And this is kind of a compilation of the issues that were brought up about this having adverse impact to the neighborhood. One of the issues was the sewer line. There were 2 sewer lines, 8 inches in 3850 and 3800 south. Those 8-inch lines can handle 400 units. Both of those lines, it starts at where this project is or the homes next to it. So there is nothing adding to the line at this point. So the capacity of those lines, and capacity based on slope and other factors, is 3850 can do 600 gallons per minute. Presently, when the department went out and reviewed, there's a 10 gallon per minute flow in that line. In 3800, 730 gallons per minute it can handle. There's a 5 gallon per minute flow in it. There was a concern voiced that IHC is connected to the sewer line. IHC is not. Their connection takes place further to the west on the main trunk line that was developed when the hospital was developed years ago. And even the new building connects into that. I know there was some concern brought up that there actually was a connection made. The trenching that took place was actually a water line that connected into the new building, and then that water line had created a sinkhole and it had to be patched up and repaired and patched up, but the sewer line is not connected to that. The other concern that came out about the sewer, and recently our city engineer said if every toilet and every shower and every faucet was turned on the 41 units, that would generate 300 gallons per minute, which is still below the 600 gallon per minute capacity of the line. And that's happening if everything was turned on in the building all at one time. And so there is adequate room, as mentioned. It can handle up to 400 units on that line, that 8-inch line. There was also concern about the age of the line. It was installed when the subdivision was developed. Again, for the city, it's a relatively new line. We have much older lines that are functioning. And in talking with our sewer department, they don't see a real concern. They've had to repair a few things, take care of some items that had sunk and created a belly in the area, but they've repaired that. The only area that they have now in their master plan of repair work is on 36th Street. There's a 495-foot section that's in the master plan of replacement. But again, that's further down the line. That doesn't have an impact to these properties or anything in this neighborhood until after 36th Street. And the sewer department's well aware of that. Another issue that was brought up was the access onto the local road. And it's a concern of the neighborhood because if you look at the road system that exists there, it's a cul-de-sac without being a cul-de-sac. There is no west traffic. There is no south traffic because it all dead ends at that point. Van Buren runs to the north. There's nothing going to the south, and 3850 again only goes from Van Buren to Harrison, and so it serves those local residents. And so it is a quiet street. It's a 60-foot right-of-way without street parking during the daytime. Again, that's because of student parking that took place throughout a lot of different neighborhoods, and the neighbors coming together and saying, we're not going to have daytime parking on the street, and having that signage placed, there's no parking during the daytime. The neighborhood does experience a heavy impact when the fireworks take place up at Weber State. Every street is parked on in the evening, and at that time there is real congestion. But the concern, again, was the roads would be inadequate to handle the additional traffic. One of the things that was looked at, especially in that concern of traffic, was access onto Harrison Boulevard so it wouldn't have to enter into the neighborhood. In our discussions with UDOT at the very beginning of this project, as we met with them to talk about what their criteria would be, they made it clear to us that unless the office building to the north was part of the project and that driveway be the access, that is the closest access they'd allow on Harrison because of the turn lane, and they would prefer alternate methods to get to the project from other local streets rather than on Harrison Boulevard. And that raises the question that once that development was taken out of this proposal, they didn't have that option, so the only options now available for access are those two local streets, 3850 or Brinker. The concern with using 3850 also comes in the distance of where the driveway would be for this project in relationship to the light and stacking that occurs at the light. There's a 125-foot distance proposed in the plan. Ordinances require a minimum of 80 feet from the light for a driveway. One of the chief concerns was the wintertime conditions, and I'll show you a picture of that in a second. And then I'll go back to this one comment. So this is the street, typically during the daytime. Winter, though, you see what happens on that eastbound lane as the snow piles up, that lane is reduced. And also, right at that part, probably 40 or 50 feet, it also takes a steep pitch up to meet Harrison. And the concern is that at that time when it's iced up, people really can't get up it because there's no traction, so they'll look at alternate methods then to get out of the area. One of the concerns, again, a valid concern of the neighborhood, is that at those points, the traffic then will go different directions, and that is a valid concern. The developer did a traffic study just recently, and the results have indicated that the distance of the driveway in their determination is adequate because the stacking area is about 60-foot queuing to the light. The traffic impact, as they look at it in terms of the number of units, 41, as they compared it to other projects, other student housing projects throughout Orem and Logan, and use those numbers, and also traffic modeling that Wasatch Front Regional Council uses, would anticipate the highest traffic demand peak hours are in the evening, which add in that peak hour time, add about 26 to 30 cars additional demand on the road at that peak hour. So that's not over the full 24 hours. That's just that peak hour time. But generally, they anticipate 160 car per day addition to the road traveling in that area, which is far below the capacity of the road. The two-lane road can handle anywhere from 5 to 10,000 cars. Other areas adjust and have that happen. Now, that's not what's happened in this neighborhood, and that's not what will happen in this neighborhood. But any increase is a concern from where they are now of the very light traffic just because of the unique configuration of the road system there. But it is a legitimate issue about how in the wintertime there are some decreased capacities because of the snow and the ice that takes place and changing routes. Another concern was brought up was view sheds. Unfortunately, in the state, unless easement is purchased, there are no regulations to enforce view sheds. That's why the height limit was so important in the Planning Commission's discussion of the conditional overlay. You'll notice that magenta line there, that is what the height would be with the new proposed elevation. So it's taking the photo that was done and superimposed the previous building and showing that from 3800, just a lot off of Brinker, what the building would look like in terms of its mass. So that red line is now where the roof line would be under their new proposal of a flat roof. So you can kind of get an idea of that impact. Other issues that were discussed and brought up by the neighborhood was concerned power outages. In terms of every project, they have to meet certain standards in terms of power and an energy audit. And they'd have to install a transformer then to meet their needs for an on-site transformer to meet their needs, and that's done with Rocky Mountain Power. Now, that doesn't address that there may be other system problems, but there is adequate electricity with that transformer to service the building. Stormwater runoff. One of the key things of any new development is they have to control their runoff to what it would have been if there had been no development on the property, and retain that on site and then release it at a slow rate as if, again, no development had occurred, but it's just general natural runoff. So that doesn't increase the demand on the system, but it does require them to use their property to hold that water back in a storm event. There was discussion about wind and its effect to homes further to the west. That's one of the things why the Planning Commission talked about trees and certain requirements of trees and buffering and the building orientation and being further away from homes is to try to help reduce that effect and, again, reduce the height of the building. So, again, it reduces that impact. I think one of the key issues is that this is a change for what is presently taking place in the neighborhood. And that is something important. It's not, it's not just, oh, yeah, that's it. It is a change. And that's where the discussion, I think, it takes place of what are the impacts and what do you do to try to mitigate those impacts, or if you feel that you can't mitigate that, then you make your decisions based on that. I think all the other technical things are addressed. I think there's adequate services, and as the Planning Commission looked at this, based on the laying of the property, the division of parcel lines and zone lines, and the fact that a lot of the impacts can be mitigated, they felt that this still could work with the neighborhood. In their recommendation to you, they voted 6-0 to recommend approval of rezoning the property to R5 with a development agreement that stipulated the maximum height of 44 feet, the maximum units to 41, a traffic study, which has been conducted now, screening along property lines, screening of the parking lots, trees being installed, fence along Brinker to prevent pedestrian access to go on through the neighborhood, but send it up towards Weber State because of the fencing, light being shielded so it doesn't go to the neighborhood, signage only on Harrison Boulevard, having a site manager, and again, no pedestrian access on Brinker 3800 South. Those be conditions applied to the rezoning request. The last item was then the petition regarding student housing, and that is that text amendment. So this timeline, you see, I've added in the bottom the red. So this came way at the end of the process. So neighbors had met, we had talked to the discussions, we had all these Planning Commission meetings. Then a separate petition was filed, and the Planning Commission first looked at it on March 1st of this year, and then again on March 15th. And so what I'm talking about today is that what they talked about in those meetings in March and their recommendation regarding that separate petition, which is a text amendment, but they're all tied together. So just to give you a quick background, a family is defined as a unit related by blood or marriage, or two individuals and their children, or up to three unrelated people. Any one of those is defined as a family. A combination, though, is not allowed. It's either one of the three. And a dwelling unit, then, is a residential facility that's completely independent. It has sanitation, living, food preparation, sleeping arrangements. All that is in one self-contained unit. And that can take place either in a single-family dwelling, where one family can reside, or in an apartment building where each unit holds a family, but there are multiple units. That definition, I think, is important to understand as to what's taken place, because we've always varied in the number of what we defined unrelated in a family. From 1964 to 1972, and from 1980 to 2004 is 5 unrelated. But finally, in 2004, the city said, we're changing that because there's just too many issues of the 5 unrelated that are taking place in terms of homes and neighborhoods. The life cycle of a neighborhood never gets to take place. In other words, where 2 people move in, they have a family, that family then leaves, and you have that cycle going place, and every home is on a different cycle of that happening. But where it's a constant rental of 5 unrelated, that cycle never changes, and so the neighborhood can never adapt because it's always the same. That goes with the parking of what takes place. The teenagers come, you get a lot of cars, teenagers leave, the cars are gone. Again, those cycles take place. And also the concern that too many rentals of homes for student housing was taking away the stock for full-time families to be able to find a home and to be able to settle in that area. And that neighborhood stability was a key issue. So in 2004, the city said, okay, we're not having 5 unrelated. We'll change the definition to 3 unrelated people. So that's important to understand. Most cities still define a family as 4 or 5 unrelated. We are the unusual city in terms of we say 3 unrelated. State law took place after we did our ordinance, and basically said that you can't have less than 4 unrelated. You can't have your community have a standard of less than 4 unrelated unless you are a university city, and then you can go to 3 unrelated. And that was basically because we already had our law in place and argued the point of why it was important to have that 3 unrelated. But other cities don't have that. They have a higher standard or higher number standard. Other types of housing that also exist in our ordinance are bachelor and bachelorette dwellings. This is what was used to build Harrison Heights and Evergreen Apartments, which is on 35th and Iowa. And this allowed 5 or more unrelated people to be in a dwelling. I guess you could call that as the first attempt at student housing to allow that provision. There are other provisions of boarding houses and lodging houses, and most recently the ADU of allowing up to 2 adults into a single-family home with the owner lives there, so they could rent out a basement or an accessory structure on their property for up to 2 adults. Those are other housing standards that exist in different areas. So the student housing concept is not new. A petition took place in 2006. After we enacted the 3 unrelated, 2 years later, someone petitioned to get it back to 5. That was denied. 2007, a petition again was filed that within 2,000 feet to allow up to 5 unrelated. That was again denied. So the discussion comes now, here's a new petition. And a couple of things as we've discussed this and as we've discussed with the Planning Commission is the fact that a student housing is basically multiple bedrooms that share the living facilities, cooking, bathroom, those type of things. And there's a seasonal fluctuation that generally takes place in those units. So it's not all 12 months of the year in terms of that number of people living in that, but there will be that fluctuation. But what we see happening is more of the student housing is going to single beds in a single bedroom, rather than maybe some, you recall when you went to university, that you shared everything, and that included the bedrooms. But that is a trend that is kind of going the other direction now. We looked at what other cities with universities in them do. We looked at USU, BYU, Southern Utah, Dixie State, and looked at some of their standards and then compared it to what we have presently. Most do have provisions that allow up to 6 unrelated. Cedar City, again, just 6 with 4 all over the entire city, so they don't make a distinction. But what they do make a distinction is in parking and proximity then to the campus, and set standards that, rather than our present dwelling ordinance, which says if you're a dwelling, you have 2 stalls per dwelling unit, and if you're close to transit, you can go to 1.5 stalls per dwelling unit. Well, as you get into the student housing concept of it, there needs to be additional parking other than those general standards. And so as we looked at this, we noticed each community, whether done by bedroom or whether it was done by occupant, they look at having higher standards than what you typically have for apartments. And so that became a key factor in the discussion. We also looked at, they looked at building heights and set some standards on building heights. The closer it got, they allowed higher densities, but they still limited the heights of buildings because they would, again, transition next to neighborhoods. We looked at the layout of where are those campuses in relationship to the city, and again, finding that a lot of them are more centrally located into the community. There may be barriers such as I-15 with Dixie, or I-15 with Southern Utah. But all around them, they still were predominantly in the middle of neighborhoods and had homes on all sides of them. We then looked at our Weber State situation and noticed some differences here because of the linear development of what took place, especially when you look at the mountains and then the other types of development that have taken place around the campus with more commercial type and institutional type, how that created a very linear corridor, and that Harrison frontage then became key in the discussion of, well, if we're going to have student housing, where should it be? Because that linear connection now makes it possible for walkability and transit connections. And so that corridor was looked at as an appropriate area that we would not define student housing outside of that corridor, of that linear area along Harrison Boulevard. And one of the items the Planning Commission is recommending to you is that besides changing the definition to create student housing and allow up to 4 unrelated in student housing, was whatever housing project takes place has to have frontage on Harrison Boulevard. It can't go further out. It needs to stay along that corridor. Whoop, I hit the wrong thing. So the recommendation from the Planning Commission to you on a 6-0 vote was to create a definition to allow 4 unrelated as student housing, to put a provision that can only be in the C2 or R5 zones that front Harrison Boulevard between 35th and 48th, that there be a minimum in a project of 10 student dwelling units. This is to avoid single-family homes or duplexes trying to be converted back to student housing. It has to be a larger project. And set a standard of 0.7 parking stalls per bedroom. Also create a standard inside the building that if there's a 2-person bedroom, it has to be a minimum of 130 square feet in size. So that sets a kind of a design standard inside that limits how many people can be in a bedroom. And that if it's new construction, that it have at least 50% of the exterior in brick. So that is the recommendation regarding this. Now, I know in the work session, we had talked about the corridor that the Planning Commission talked about. And I think as from the work session, as we went back and looked at the analysis, I think reducing that from 48th to 44th, 4400 South, is a more practical of what could really take place. But again, that's our review after the Planning Commission's recommendation of that to you, but that's just out there for your consideration. So these are the 3 items the Planning Commission has recommended to you regarding the petitions that have come in. Any questions of me?
As I read the comments from the citizens attending the Planning Commission, they were more concerned with the impact in the neighborhood and the community that you addressed there. So do you think the information that you provided would answer some of those questions, whether the impact is still evident there?
Well, I think there's two parts to that question. Again, any change from what your baseline is, of what you're used to, is an impact to people. And I don't think you can say, well, it won't impact them, because there's change that takes place. But I think it's an impact that doesn't change the quality of life, that still can be things as normal and not have and create problems now for the neighborhood. So yes, I think the things we've done help make it compatible, but people will still feel it's an impact because it is a change. It is something different from what they're used to.
So a couple of questions. You said that the underground parking was to be, it's already out, they've already taken that out with the new,
Correct.
right? That change has been made. And then 35th to 4400 South, that has not been changed. It still says 35th to 48th Street, correct?
Correct. So that's the Plan Commission's recommendation to you, but as we had a discussion in a work session to go out and look and say, would there be other recommendations? That's, as we looked, that's the recommendation would make, but that's not the Plan Commission's recommendation.
So how would we change that, Greg?
Well, if you decide to do the student housing definition in your motion, you're just change it to that different, because you can always go less from what's been noticed, but you can't increase. And so you could lessen that just by motion.
So I asked this question earlier in our work session. What else could go on that property right now, today, without any change, without any coming to us kind of stuff?
I wish I could, this well, this is the older program. If I can just get the old screen to, let's go up. I want to kind of use this illustration to answer that question. No. Okay, this would work on that map. So presently, the eastern half of 3801 Harrison is zoned PI, and also a portion of the one house just west of the duplex is zoned PI.
That's professional.
It's a professional institutional. So that would allow business and professional offices. That would allow housing above those offices. It would allow daycare. It would allow fraternity and sorority type things if there were on Weber State, recognized by Weber State. It allows, I think I said daycare. Those are the types of things that would allow group dwelling, but with the zone dividing the property, other than a couple fourplexes, it may be hard to get the full development because, again, the zone boundary line takes out half the acreage of the property that is zoned PI. Now, the landmarks, not the landmarks, but the Board of Adjustments has the right, when a property is divided by a zone boundary line, to extend a use across that line. But that's by the Board of Adjustment action. So that could add some more units, or, like I said, if it's housing above an office building, that would be allowed. The number of units is dictated by the maximum height of 35 feet.
And this project now is at 37? Okay.
The R16 is basically limited to single-family home, and that's the main use, single-family homes.
R5 is the...
So there is nothing that's R5 at this point. They're all were rezoned to PI. But the plan does say R5. And so if they came to say, well, we just want our zone R5, what the plan says, that eastern half, then that could get you into an apartment building of, I think we figured it on that size somewhere because we take out the other acreage, somewhere around 60 units. But the issue would then be access.
So it's currently zoned R1, but the community plan says it can go to an R5. Is that correct? Is that what you just said?
So the western half is zoned R1, and the community plan doesn't have any options that way. It's the properties that are to the east, the eastern half that face Harrison, that have the R5 but are presently zoned PI. Hopefully that's clear.
And so that access would be off of Brinker if there was a building to be built there on the east side.
It'd still be Brinker, or again, because they own a piece that's zoned PI, it still could come off 3850 on that piece that they have there.
Can you clarify for me the details of that traffic study? We threw a lot of numbers out when you got to that part. So you mentioned 26 to 30 cars added during peak hour?
During peak hour, uh-huh.
How does that relate to the stack up at the light?
So what they said in the study was that the evening hour was the peak hour, and so that, of course, is people coming into that area rather than that, so that the stack-up issue didn't exist at that point. During the morning hours, they looked at a peak being 16, and they said that in stacking, a 60-foot stack from the light would be adequate to still maintain a level of service. So that's basically 3 cars stacking up the light, because what they observed is without adding the department numbers into it, they were observing in that hour time frame 4 to 5 cars in the morning time going that direction. Now, this was on a May date when they did the study.
That's currently? That was current?
Yeah, May 2017.
So not during school?
Not during school, but again, since there is no parking allowed on the streets, the only school activity would be if people live there at that point and are heading to Weber State. So there's no, there would be no reason for a student who doesn't live there already in a rental house to drive that, because they can't park on the street to get to campus.
The 60-foot stacking, how many cars is that?
3.
3? And you said that currently it's already exceeding that, and that the proposal in front of us would further exceed that?
Well,
at times.
The concern was to be, especially at winter, when you can't get up that, if that intersection is icy, and that delay of taking place of people trying to get up and the timing of the light could create that problem during that condition. So that's the anomaly in the whole thing, is that condition would create that further stacking. But typically without that, it functions properly. And that is also something that then you could look at if it does become an issue of changing the timing of the light, if there becomes a stacking issue that creates a problem with that level of service on that intersection.
What do you define as the level of service?
That kind of gets out of my expertise, but generally they talk about A, B, C, D, and F level of services. And anything from a C higher is typical and acceptable. They gave the intersections an A rating.
Currently or
Currently.
under proposed condition?
And they still said, even after this, they still gave it an A rating.
I'm trying to envision what the planning commissions would look at, and as you explained it, it seems like the conditional overlay has more restrictions placed on this property, on this development. Am I wrong with
No,
that?
that's correct. That's why they went to the conditional overlay. They felt that if it were not for the conditional overlay, doing it R5 would not be the appropriate situation.
So there's probably more control on this project than if it was left unzoned, under the original zones that it is under now.
Correct.
You mean tighter restrictions? Is that what you mean?
Yes, uh-huh.
Let's do it.
The overlay, it's tighter.
Yeah.
So let me ask one more question about that traffic study. The data was collected on a single day, is that correct?
It was collected, let me just, May 4th. Yeah, Thursday, May 4th. And is done for the full day and full evening time period.
Is the conclusions of the study only representative of that day, or is
Well, they took that as the,
extrapolated throughout
they
the
took
year?
that as the information and then ran modeling, and then compared that modeling to different projects throughout the state of student housing and what those numbers are showing, to compare, is their modeling consistent with what they're experiencing with other similar facilities in other locations in terms of the trips generated.
Hey, I one more question. On the student housing, we've talked about that, and we know that this project is probably looking at student housing, but there's no guarantee that every resident in that complex would be a student at Weber State. Is that correct?
Correct. At any one point in time, there wouldn't be a guarantee.
And so would they govern that, or how would that work?
Well, I know different communities look at it different ways in definition. I think St. George is the most strict because they require that 75% of those in the building provide their transcripts each quarter to the manager, who then provides it to the city to determine are they meeting a student definition as they have it. Other communities don't go to that extreme. They just look at it, proximity to campus and the living arrangement will kind of just gravitate towards student housing. So there's a broad spectrum you can take a look at as far as how do you define that. It's going to be more how do you manage it after that point. The more provisions you create, the harder it is to try to manage.
But we're anticipating that there may be non-students in this area.
I'm sure there would be, but generally, when you're renting out bedroom, the rent is based on you've got 3 or 4 bedrooms in the house, and those fees. That kind of sets a different standard for how people would look at. Doesn't mean that people won't go together and say, okay, there's 4 or 5 friends, let's go together and do that. But
Weber State is primarily maybe a commuter college university than compared to the University of Utah or some of the other institutions that we listed there. So, but it's more of a commuter institution. The students are commuting onto the university there.
And I think that's one of the reasons, as the Planning Commission looked at this with the 40 units, again, was to say, okay, there seems to be a need. We don't know how big that need is, and will this project demonstrate there's even a further need, or is this the right mix of units for that need? Because even though there is a commuter school for a majority of the population, there are still people renting houses all the way around that go to Weber State. And whether they're in an apartment building or whether they're in the basement of a home or the entire house, that still compromises a lot of the things taking place in the neighborhood. And again, since Weber State moved to that location, that has always been a discussion of how much of that housing is taken up by students. So even if it's a commuter school, it's still an issue in that area of student housing and how it's being met.
So it's an advantage for Weber State to have more student housing in this area then.
Well, I think, I'll have Weber State speak for themselves, but I think in terms of needs that are out there, I think it is an appropriate item.
And you don't know what the market rate is for a...
I don't. I think the developers would have that information, so you could ask them that.
And you said in your presentation there would be an on-site manager?
Uh-huh.
Is it a 24-hour on-site
Yes.
manager?
That's one of the items in the development agreement.
Any other questions?
I bet we'll have more later.
I bet so too.
Okay.
All right, thanks. And we have the petitioner here, or petitioners here. I don't know which one of you want to. Sure.
I'd like to begin, my name's Adam Allred, I'm one of the developers, my partner Dan Stevens, and then we have our builders with us and our architect and our realtor. I'd like to begin my comments tonight to just say thank you to the planners, especially to Greg Montgomery and John Mayer. When we were considering this project and we were looking at this and discussing it, we got a number of quizzical eyebrows raised from our bank to realtors to just associates in general about why we would want to try to develop in Ogden. Apparently Ogden has a reputation for, at least amongst some, for not being kind to developers, but our experience has been completely opposite. John Mayer and Greg Montgomery have been extraordinarily helpful. So just like to start off with my comments of saying thank you to both of them and to the rest of the planners and the Planning Commission. And thank you to the City Council for hearing us tonight and giving us the opportunity to present. There's two main points that I want to discuss about why we want to do this project. The first is the need, and the second is the timing. I think they're interrelated. To begin with the need, to get the funding that we need for this project, it requires a lot of money to go through the bank and investors. They don't take our word for it when it comes to just giving us money. We tell them we think this is a great idea, and then they send us to a third party to get a third party to do market research. And we have a study that I want to cite. Hopefully I can pull that up. So I see one. How do I change to the? Oh, just the arrows back and forth. Yeah, perfect. Okay, I'll just get to that in a second. Thanks. So I'm going to cite just a couple of slides here from a rather extensive market study that we had conducted. The market study was performed by a man named Jeff Neese. He is known as I understand it, the Oracle in Utah for student housing and multifamily housing. He's been doing this for 30 years. And banks over these years have, on his recommendation, invested hundreds of millions of dollars. As far as we're concerned, and as far as the City Council is concerned, he would be considered an expert in this field in regards to what may or may not be a good investment for banks and for other investors. So he's the one that performed our market study. It's no surprise that our bank sent us to him. Apparently he is somewhat of a household name among Utah bankers. So to begin with, on page 24 of the study, this is just going to show what he found in his study to be the annual expected growth rate for Weber State. So right now in the fall semester of 2017, we're looking at about 29,000 students enrolled, with a growth rate expected to be about 3.5% going forward. So you can see over the course of not too many years, up to 2005, there's nearly a 10,000 student increase in Weber State based off of these numbers that are projected from the Utah system of higher education. So there's definitely going to be growth associated with Weber State. That's aside from anything that Weber State is doing on their own to increase that growth, any marketing campaigns or any outreaches that they have to invite students from outside of the state or even outside of the country. This is something that's just what to be expected right now with the current trend and expectations based off of, as I said, the Utah system of higher education. So for us, this is very telling. This says that there's going to be a need. There is already a need as far as we're concerned, and there's going to be a continual growing need for housing. Going to the next slide on page 85 of this study, this is going to be, sorry, this is a little bit harder to read, so I'll just address some of these things The estimated enrollment, as I said, is about 29,000 for the fall semester of 2017. The projected enrollment growth to 2020 is going to be roughly 3,150 or so students. So in the next 3 years, there's an expected 3,150 students that are expected to increase. The current estimated demand for enrollment is, sorry, I'm having a hard time reading this myself. Can you zoom it in? Yeah. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, that's fine. No, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thought my eyesight was going.
I was trying to read it from
Yeah,
here.
it is.
I was having a hard time, so I'm sure you guys were having a hard time as well. Estimated current demand 2017, assuming that 10% are bed rentals, is 3,196. Estimated new demand from 2017 to 2020 is 315. So that's a total demand for beds based off of this study. So students that are looking for places to stay, to hang up their hat, so to speak, of about 3,500 students from now until 2000. About 3,200 right now, but 2020, about 3,500 students that are looking for a place to stay, a bed. The current supply of beds for 2017, as you can see, is 1,132, with an estimated 160 new beds, that being our project, as there was no other projects that the study was aware of to increase the capacity for students for more beds, which gives a total supply of 1,292 beds. That will leave a shortage by 2020 of 2,219 beds. So according to the market research that has been performed by Jeff Neese, this looks like a very needful project. When presenting this information, there we go. When presenting this information to the bank, a capture rate of 10% is generally adequate. When they look at a need, they say, okay, if you can capture 10% of that rate with the project in mind, then that's in the realm of looking good. All we need to capture from those numbers is 4.6%. So it looks very favorable based off of that market study. So that's from our end. As far as why we as a business, as developers, are looking to develop here is because not only based off of our own preliminary research, we saw need with our preliminary research, the things that we did. There is definitely need based off of this market study for more student housing with the growth that's expected, and with the current status quo, there's just not enough student housing. The other point to this need, I think, is that there are not a lot of options for housing within a close proximity of Weber State. You have Weber State campus housing, which is the Wildcat Village and the University Village. You have Harrison Heights, which is basically within walking distance of Weber State. And then you have houses, duplexes, private houses for rent that are available. In our research, I would think one of the questions earlier was how much is the market? Was that the
Market rate.
So right now, with the University Village, the rate is they are 95% full, generally speaking, for their fall semester. The rate is between $660, $650 per student per month, in average, roughly. That's based off of based off our market research. So that's the University Village, which is, I believe I hope I'm not getting these mixed up. University Village is the south of the D Event Center, is that right? And then Wildcat Village is the dorms, making sure I have that right. Wildcat Village is different. It's a dorm setting, so it has a different appeal to some, or not an appeal to some. So that has it's a kind of its own anomaly. In regards to Harrison Heights, we actually called Harrison Heights at the beginning of last fall to see if there was any availability for us to rent out for that semester, and their office informed us that there was, I think the quote was, there was no room in the inn. It was completely filled up at that point, and their rates right now are between $600 and $650 as well, roughly, depending on fees and such, a month for rent. With us coming in, I think we appeal to, from my perspective as a future father of a student that will be going to school, that seems rather expensive, in the $600 range a month for one room for one student. People pay for it. Harrison Heights has been filled up. As I mentioned, University Village is at 95% capacity. So there's definitely demand for it. But I think there's a lot of students that would prefer to stay in housing such as that, as opposed to searching around for basement dwellings or for rooms in houses that are off campus. One of the appeals to the project that we have is that we expect our rental rates to be anywhere between $400 and $450 with all fees included. So this will appeal to a different group of students, ones that maybe aren't as fortunate or don't have as much financial resources at their disposal for their rents. So we'll be more competitive than those around us, but I don't think that will necessarily take away from the demand. I think it will just be more accessible to a different type of student that it doesn't have, like I said, the same accessibility to.
And what are all those amenities that you just?
Well, that would include utilities, that would include internet, that would include laundry inside their apartment. So some of the student housing has laundry outside, and you have to pay for your laundry. So kind of the basic stuff, but utilities, including internet and their laundry accessibility inside each unit. Speaking of amenities, some have expressed concern that we've heard that there maybe isn't enough amenities with our project, and I would humbly suggest that the location is the amenity itself. Being next to Weber State within walking distance will encourage students to participate in more activities at Weber State, to go to the gym there, to go to the swimming pool there, to go to bowling or whatever other extracurricular activities they're involved in. They'll be within walking distance to be able to do that, readily access that. Also, it's going to be a brand new building. We're going to have granite countertops. As mentioned, there's going to be laundry, 9-foot ceilings. It's going to be very nice, a beautiful building. We have a great architecture and a great building team. So this is going to be something that's different than what's there right now in terms of being recent and new and modern and having a pleasant atmosphere to it. Right now, I guess going along with the need right now, it is an overgrown lot with a dilapidated house on it. It is, for all intents and purposes, an eyesore for Weber State, for the city of Ogden, just in general. It's not very pleasant to look at. When we purchased it, it was in bad condition. So going forward, it's with a little bit of excitement to be able to tear that down and put something beautiful there, hopefully, that is appealing and brings pride to Ogden. In addition to those who are more fiscally concerned, the tax revenue to Ogden based off of our projections of rent are going to be about in the range of an additional $50,000 a year to Ogden. So this is, instead of having an empty lot that is doing basically nothing, this will increase Ogden City's revenue on taxes fairly significantly. So to my next point, timing. Why now? Why should we approve this right now as opposed to considering more options or waiting maybe for a better deal to come down the road? One is, if we get started right now, it's a year out. So we're not going to be finished building this project until fall semester of 2018, at which point there will be an additional 1,017 students projected to be attending Weber State that are looking for places to stay. We are building a project that's going to house 160. So there's going to continually be a need for student housing, and this is going to be a step in the right direction, but it's only going to continue to become more and more dire, I guess, to produce something for students to stay in. Also, The project itself, we have purchased roughly 1.6 acres of land. The other parts of that project are houses that are under contract. If the project is postponed right now, for whatever reasons, some indefinite period of time to wait for something, more information, or to wait for a better deal to come along or some better project, those houses that we have under contract are not going to stick around waiting for that to happen. So the project as it looks right now is, in some ways, is completely out of our control. It will not go forward as it looks right now if we don't have a set period of time, at least from our perspective, to be able to move forward and make this happen. Furthermore, and our builder will speak to this when it's opened up to the public, there are just deadlines that we have to meet. And for this to make sense for us as developers, we need to have this rented out by the fall of 2018. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense for us to do this. We're going to have bills to pay, interest to pay. There's going to be things accruing at a fairly rapid pace, and we can't sit on $500,000 worth of land indefinitely waiting for something to be approved. If it's going to happen for us, as far as we're concerned, we have to move on it fairly quickly so that we can have it available to be rented out in fall 2018. That's kind of a must for us. If that doesn't happen, and we're in kind of a crunch right now of trying to make this work, we're able to do it. One of my builders will speak more to that. If that's not able to happen, we're going to be in a position where we're going to be trying to recapture some of our investment in some other way, as we were talking about other options to build on there. Smaller units, duplexes, maybe a fourplex if we can zone for that. But it will definitely be something far less than this, which for those in the neighborhood that are opposing the project, this is going to be something that's going to probably embolden them and be exciting to hear. For us, it's just a factual situation that we're in where we have to have something working for us. We can't sit indefinitely waiting for something else to come down. So I guess in closing my remarks out, I would say that there's probably two extremes here. One is the extreme of the previously suggested project, which was the Death Star, as it was described, I think, by Rick Southwick, the Death Star project. It was big and it was bold, and it didn't succeed. The other extreme is to do nothing, to leave a dilapidated lot, or to have this prime location across from Weber State developed as a duplex or something that would be far less satisfactory for the needs of Weber State. It seems like those are the two extremes. We have done our best as the developers to try and find out what Ogden City would like, what Weber State would like, what would be most sellable to the neighborhood, something that would be less impactful on them. There's, as Greg Montgomery pointed out, there's no way that this is not going to be an impact in the form of some sort of change, but we have done everything in our power to minimize the amount of that change to the neighborhood with with kind of the common sense understanding that this is right next to a university. You live in a neighborhood that is next to a university where there needs to be opportunities to grow and provide student housing if you're going to live next to a university. 40% of the houses in that neighborhood are rented, primarily to students. So it's already basically a student neighborhood to some extent. 40% of it is. The change hopefully is not going to be something as drastic as some have felt that it will be. I think this will be minimized, and we've done our best to make this as digestible as possible, with the expectation and hope that in the future there's other opportunities for us to acquire other properties around there at a better rate. Right now, negotiations, they know where we're at, they know where the city council's at, and it's extraordinarily expensive to try and open up any other opportunities, for example, access to Harrison, which we would love to do. It's just we're not in a position to be able to do that right now, but who knows what the future holds. But that's something that we're looking at to move down. So I would just invite the city council to ask yourselves, if not this, then what? And if not now, when are these issues going to be addressed? And if not us, then who? What developer is going to come along and try and start this process all over again? It's been quite expensive for us. It's required a lot of time. That's part of the risk that we go through with business. We understand that. But if this project is not approved, what developer is going to come along and say, well, let me give it another go and see if we can get something to go through? At some point, I really feel strongly, and I hope that you feel as well, that this is going to be necessary, if it's not already necessary, to have something done for the growth of Weber State and for the encouragement of creating an atmosphere at Weber State that is more traditional. Thank you for your time. Are there any questions that I can answer?
Questions for the petitioner?
One question, you talked about student housing, so, and I'm sure some of the residents in this project are not going to be students. Is that correct then?
I'm certain there's going to be some that aren't students. The appeal, of course, will be for students in location to Weber State, but being a student myself, at one point I took 2 years off to travel to India and to go to Egypt and to walk the earth, and then went back to school, and I'm sure there's going to be students that at times are not attending school and therefore wouldn't be considered a student. I think it will generally be a student population. Students are going to be drawn to that location for the, for the sheer fact that it's right next to Weber State and they can walk to school. I owned a duplex across the street from Weber State on 37th and Eccles, so a few blocks down, and I had no problem ever renting out my duplex, and it was almost always to students. Occasionally there would be a roommate in there that wasn't, but that was a duplex, 4 blocks further west than where our site is proposed.
So if I come in and say, I'd like to rent this space here, what process would I go through?
Well, as far as whether you're a student or not, or just in general?
Right.
In general?
General.
Well, we would do a background check, we would do a credit check, we would do the kind of standard protocol to make sure that whoever is going to be living there is going to be of reputable report and somebody we can expect to pay rent. But as far as asking whether they were a student or not, we're not planning on making that a requirement to be there. But our expectation and the purpose for which we are building this, the reason why we feel like this is a great investment, is because we feel like there's a need for students and this is going to appeal to students. So does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Any other question? All right, thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
All right, now we open it up for an opportunity to receive public input. Please come up and state your name.
And address.
Address for the record, and 3 minutes.
Robert Lauer, live at 1120 East, 3850 South. Been there about 15 years. 3850 is a nice, quiet street. We have older people. We have a lot of young families with lots of kids that are in that neighborhood. We've had a couple rentals on 3850. One time was 5 young ladies from Weber State, and they would screw in a red light bulb anytime it was a party night, and the next morning we'd have broken glass and stuff everywhere. So we finally got smart, and anytime we saw the light on, we started calling the cops. And after about the 10th call and the 10th time that they had to come out and visit them, then they finally decided to move. So that worked out good. We want to keep it nice and quiet if we can. Now, obviously, there's growth and construction, things of that nature. The sewer, I have issues with that. About 3625 Van Buren, before it hits 36th Street, if you're heading north, is on a slope, and then it stops, and it actually goes up to hit 36, where it attaches onto the sewer line to head west. About every week and a half, there's a truck on the intersection of 37th and Van Buren shooting water down there to blow that out because it builds up in that little dead spot there. So what I'm worried about is that many more butts coming down there and backflowing into the people on Van Buren. That's a main concern of mine. I know they say that we can handle the more stuff. I mean, my house was built in '59. Most of them are around that time. So they're older. I understand that. On 38th and Van Buren, there's kind of a sinkhole that's been there for quite a while. They've patched over quite a few times, but a big dump truck full of dirt or something comes through there, we might have a very big problem. Biggest problem is coming out of their building onto 3850 to head towards Weber State. We've talked about 60 feet, so that's basically 3 vehicles, especially in winter. But even during the summer, if you've got 140 vehicles coming out to go to work, go to school, whatever, and there's 3 cars that are stopped up, Their only option is to turn and head west on 3850. And then they'll either go down Van Buren or they'll go back up to Brinker and then out to 36th. But it's just going to cause a lot of congestion. Now, 3850 has signs they can't park before or after 1 o'clock. They can't park until after 1 o'clock. But Van Buren, there's parking all over on that. 38th, there's parking in the church parking lot. There's lots of cars already congested and in there as it is. And we have lots of walkers, people that go to Weber State, we understand that. Right now, a lot of them cut through this property where they're putting the development. So if that gets blocked off, am I out of time? I'm sorry.
You can finish your statement.
If that gets blocked off, we'll have more people walking up 3850 and more walking up 37th. So that'll kind of disrupt the nice kind of flow that we have now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Dave DeYoung. I'm a current property owner, actually under contract with the developer on 3850. Just a couple of comments. There's, as you know, a large vacant lot behind me. And each year that I've had my property over 10 years, I get a call, several calls of somebody interested in developing the property. And I would just like to share that this developer, the final developer, is very conscientious of the neighborhood. Many concessions have been made, very workable with the city. And so I really urge you to consider the quality of what will take place and will be built there, and also the residents as well. I want to state that the development is very functional and practical. You know, some of the amenities of some other university housings may have pools or volleyball areas that can actually cause a lot of noise and parties and things. This is a very conservative, very well thought out plan that blends well with the neighborhood. I also want to share a couple of thoughts on parking, if I might. This is actually something I can speak from experience. A large percentage of the students will not even have cars. Prior to the code change, I was one that rented out rooms, and I had actually parents concerned about their students wanting to be able to make sure it was close to the school, but because it's walking distance, they specifically looked for properties that their sons or daughters could be able to have properties that they could walk to school. And so any given time when I shared rooms like that, I had probably 25% of the students that rented from me that didn't even have a car. It's close to a bus stop. It's easily accessible for students. I also want to share with you another observation. A lot of times we think that all these cars are going to come flooding out at the same time. My experience with those that I've rented to, they're so grateful to be able to walk over to campus. They take their classes end at different periods of time during the day. They come back to their home, to the apartment. Some have jobs, some study, but that filtering is very scattered throughout the day. It's not like they're all going to school at the same period of time. I'd just like to comment, or I guess finish in commenting, that the developer, as I've seen, is very responsive to the desires of the community. They've had open houses, they've taken input and made many concessions. And I think this would be a very nice project for Ogden City to clean up the existing property and something that will be very value added in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marcy Peterson. I owned 2 houses on that street. I now just own 1. I just want to clarify.
I'm sorry, on what street?
On Brinker, I owned 3715 Brinker, and now I own 38th and 1135. And I agree with him. I think that I used to be totally against this, and I've been coming to these, and I think that these guys are doing a good job, and so now I'm not against it anymore. But I just want to clarify a couple things. My renter came to me the other day and asked me, he said that one of the developers or someone approached him and said that they want to come on my property and widen the street and remove some of my trees. I don't know if it was rumor or fact, but I just want to clarify, is that true that they're planning on doing that, or is there any talk of widening the road and coming into my property?
We'll ask the question after we get all the questions.
Okay. And then the second thing is, when I owned the house on 3715 Brinker, just to clarify, we did have a lot of problems with the sewer and the storm drain. Jeff Glum works for Ogden City, and his yard sunk in big time, and they had to come and do major work there. And then our house, I don't know if it was sewer or storm drain, but I just know that there was major problems there. We had to install like 3 sump pumps in our yard. So I don't know if they want to just double check that there really is something going on there. Okay,
Thank you.
I'm Tony Allred, and for transparency's sake, I am Adam Allred's uncle, so we're related. I also teach at Weber State, and Brad is going to speak for Weber State. I'm not speaking for Weber State, but I've been there for 20 years and attended there. Weber State has a huge parking problem, and these kind of student housing takes off a lot of the parking issue because they have parking there and don't have to try and find parking on campus, which is an ongoing significant problem and discussion for us at Weber State. But as a community member, I live just above the Events Center on just off of 4600. And when Weber State built the University Village, which is a much larger project than this one, I was concerned about adverse kinds of things, that there might be increase in I don't know, theft in the neighborhood, and particularly on 4600, that it would create a real traffic problem. But as the man who's selling his home mentioned, in the 5 to 10 years that University Village has been there with its 10 buildings, and Brad can tell you how many units, I drive down 4600 every day to go to work and to go to the school. There's been no traffic issue at all because most of the students do exactly that. They walk to campus and they periodically take their cars to go to work, but it's at random times. I haven't even had, in my experience, had to stop. There's a crosswalk there. In all of my daily excursions down 4600, I've never once had to stop for a student to cross the crosswalk, so it hasn't been the kind of traffic issue and nightmare that I thought it would be as a community person in the same neighborhood. But if we don't continue to create some kind of housing for these university students that are continuing to come, they're going to go somewhere. And as a homeowner, I'm much happier to see them at the University Village and in a controlled and environment that suits them and the community than to have them continually be put into rental homes that aren't taken care of. In my neighborhood, they're fairly new, and but one of the homes was rented to students, and immediately the yard wasn't taken care of and the property deteriorated. And I don't think any community member really wants continuing rental properties. As a homeowner, I would much rather have a homeowner next to me, to be honest, than a rental property. And I'm less likely to have a rental property if I live in the area of Weber State if there's housing for them that accommodates their needs, and if there isn't, someone will buy that property and use it as a rental, as an investment. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Jason. Oh, whoops, doesn't move.
Great.
I'm Jason Chan. I'm a Weber State student currently. So I'm in my 5th year, the big senior, kind of long-term senior kind of student. When I moved here a while back from Idaho, I was looking for some sort of college. I was originally going to attend the U, but then found a program at Weber State that suited me best. And as I was searching for housing, I obviously wanted to find something that was super close to the campus, and that's what I looked for. And I ended up finding a little basement apartment near the university, just off of Iowa. It was $600 for just a basement apartment, and so it was pretty expensive. But I wanted to be close to campus, and so I ended up moving out of there because it was too expensive. And I have, of course, had friends that had stayed at the Wildcat place and then the University of Village, and so I was able to go around and look inside of those. And it's not that they're like terrible, but the first image in my mind when I went into some of those was like I felt like I was in a hospital type of thing, and so it felt like more of a hotel kind of a feeling. Again, not that they're terrible. They're very nice looking, but that's the kind of first impression that I kind of got. And so just again, from a student's perspective, and as a current student, it's nice to have student housing for relatively cheap right across the street. And the parking issue that Tony just mentioned is great. It's tough to find, spots to park. I'm always parking up on past the gym, just up on we call it the triangle up there. It's free, and sometimes even that's packed, and so we end up going up all the way wrapped around there onto, I think it's Taylor, that road there. And so it's definitely nice to just leave. If I had a car, well, I wouldn't need one. I could just typically just walk right across the street to get all of my classes. And so I don't know, that's just my opinion, but thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Thomas Daniels. I live at 3835 Van Buren. And I'd just like to do a little bit of, add a little bit that the city planner kind of neglected. From the beginning, there has been significant community opposition to this project. The first project that was proposed was really, really bad. This one's better. It's merely awful. The impacts we're talking about are not insignificant. We're talking a complete change in traffic patterns. We're talking a complete change in our neighborhood. We're talking a complete change in everything that makes our community and our neighborhood what it is. And we have shown up at, I don't know, countless planning commission meetings to basically be ignored. And yeah, the city has addressed our issues, but the city has minimized them more than addressed them. Traffic's still going to be an issue. The view's still going to be an issue. The impact to our neighborhood is not insignificant, and this is going to drastically change it. And I feel like the city has just kind of minimized all of our concerns. And this entire process has really, really run down our entire neighborhood. I mean, we've had 20, 30 people show up to planning commission meetings month after month after month for the last year, over a year. And we just don't feel like we have been heard, we don't feel like we've been listened, and we feel like all of our concerns have been minimized.
Mr. Daniels? I said thank you.
Oh.
Hello, I am Annika Daniels. That is my father. I live at 3835 Van Buren Avenue. I am a student. I am in the fall and spring. I am up at Utah State, but we have lived at this location my entire life. We have never moved. My grandfather worked at Weber State. I have an intensive knowledge, and that was basically where we would go. It's where we walk our dog. We see the impact of many students on our street anyways. I mean, there is a police officer that paroles, and if you have a car parked there, you get a ticket regardless of where you live there or not. Being a student, there are a couple of concerns while sitting back there that I thought of. For example, I know that students are not quiet. We are not, as teenagers, being on their own for the first time, we don't like being told what to do. We like having parties. We like going to football games. And one thing I see as a problem with that location and that parking is, say, not all the parking's filled up. Who's going to say, oh, you know what, there's parking down at my apartment. Why don't you come park there for the football game? We'll walk up, and then you don't have to worry about getting clogged in that. And also another thing I have a problem with is I lived in an apartment that had 3 rooms. It was probably about the size of a corner over there. I paid over $400 a month for that tiny apartment, and we lived in a complex that had about 40 people in it. It was awful, and I personally don't think that the pricing comparison that they have, even though Logan is a very different city than Ogden, was completely accurate. I also know that people like their cars, especially teenagers. They like driving places. They like not having to walk. One problem I see is around 1 o'clock on Sunday afternoons, 9 o'clock in the morning, people are going to drive to church. People are going to drive to the Institute, regardless of the fact that they live maybe half a mile away. Thank you.
Thank you. Very articulate teenager.
Hi, Chris Allred, 1634 Navajo Drive, Ogden. In the spirit also of full disclosure, I am also one of Adam's uncles. My grandfather was a professor at Weber State, as was my father, as is my brother that you just heard from. I attended Weber State, as did my 10 brothers and sisters. So we're big Weber State fans. And this strikes me as something that is very beneficial to Weber State as we go forward and as Weber State continues to expand, and the type of thing that will be good, excuse me, good for our community. Weber State is such a valuable asset, and so I think it's critical that we take that into consideration. But in addition to that, I personally live about maybe 2 blocks at the most directly east of about 150 apartment units. I live in Shadow Valley. It's a very nice area, and I moved there about 15 years ago, and to tell you the truth, we were a little concerned because it was directly east of the Christopher Village apartments, Old Post apartments, and another unit that I can't remember what it's called, but I believe there are about 150 units there total. In the 15 years that I've lived there, I have not observed any identifiable negative secondary effects that I thought I might experience. Those apartment units front on Old Post Road, which is a narrow 2-lane road, and I drive back and forth on that road every day on my way to work and back from work and to other places, and I have never experienced anything remotely like traffic congestion on there, much to my surprise, frankly. So I think that I understand certainly that there are concerns in the community, but I personally live very close to significantly more units than are being proposed here, and if done correctly with proper access and screening, even in a residential area, it can be done with very little noticeable impact. So I would recommend that you approve this. Thank you.
Madam Chair, council members, my name is Brad Mortensen. I'm here to speak on behalf of Weber State University. You've heard me before, so I'll be brief. But in December of 2015, despite some of the enrollment projections that Mr. Allred showed you earlier, we had a University Planning Council meeting. We were concerned, identified a concern, that is, about our recruitment of students, particularly out-of-state students, and how we're competing with other institutions in the state. We have about half of the percentage of the other universities in the state when it comes to students who come from out-of-state at Weber State, and we didn't see any real reason why that couldn't be higher, other than we need to perhaps be a little bit more aggressive. So we started making some plans as how we as a university could do that. Along about the time the first petition that Mr. Montgomery mentioned arose, and initially our reaction was not entirely favorable. The reason being is that despite being at nearly full capacity at University Village at the housing south of the D Event Center, our Wildcat Village housing closer to campus has some capacity there that's not filled on a regular basis since it opened about 5 years ago now. So we were concerned that that might compete with our ability to offer, to fill our own housing. But as we took a step back and thought about if private developers are identifying a need that their capital can use to help meet student needs on camp, or student needs who are wanting to attend Weber State to find housing close to campus, that can be good for our transportation issues, our parking issues. It can help us to build up more of a solid student life, rid some of the commuter campus stigma that we've enjoyed for most of our time as a university, and that we can also help to build up programs on campus that will help to retain and graduate students. So we thought that This would be something that we, through our College Town Coalition, would want to work with you, the city, on in finding ways to promote the development of off-campus student housing around Weber State. At the same time, we, as a university and as a neighbor, we recognize the need to be sensitive to our neighbors in the community, those individual homeowners, and the concerns that they have. So we've tried to be a little bit agnostic when it comes to particular developers and particular projects, but have tried to be consistent in expressing to you our interest in moving forward some of the proposals, whether it's with regard to how many individuals can live in a unit, or a broader student housing overlay zone, which I know isn't the appropriate term, but I think conveys the idea that there are hopefully areas we can identify around Weber State to develop student housing, private student housing that will help us to recruit students and retain students. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Pat.
So you've heard from a crap ton of all red, so another Daniels. Lori Daniels, 3835 Van Buren Avenue. We have turned in a petition to the City Council or the Planning Commission that had 41 signatures from our neighborhood. So while we are few in numbers, we represent a larger group from our neighborhood that really is not happy about this. The 40% rental rate in our neighborhood that was mentioned, I think, is inaccurate. There are not that many rentals in our neighborhood, so it's not like we're already rentals. We're single-family homes. We love where we live. We're close to trails. We're close to everything that we love, and that's why we want to live there. An increase in traffic, what I want you to think about is, would you want any increase in traffic in your neighborhood? If this was your neighborhood, would you want 40 more cars coming through at rush hour or whatever time? And rush hour for college students is not the same time as rush hour for normal people. They don't get up at 8, they don't go to bed at 5. My own children, as you heard, they don't, they're out and about at different hours. So there'll be people in the neighborhood, there'll be people coming to visit the people in the apartments, and they'll want somewhere to park, which will be in front of my house. We're also concerned about the construction impact. We just finished up with a lovely project at the McCady Hospital site. They were there at 5 o'clock in the morning with their backup alarms. There was garbage trucks in and out. There were big trucks in and out. Dust everywhere all the time. And frankly, we're a little tired of the construction, the noise, and the impact on our neighborhood. These guys are great guys. I have nothing against the developers, but this is my neighborhood. I've been there for 20 years. I pay my taxes. I vote for city council members. And I just feel like, yeah, Weber State is great, and we love Weber State. I'm an alumni myself. But I'm concerned that this is going to set a precedent for the neighborhoods around. I already know that any home to the north of Weber State gets bought up almost immediately on that. Close to the D Event Center, they're buying up homes there. I feel like there was a major lack of foresight on Weber State's part back in the 50s when they moved Weber State up here, thinking, oh, well, we're just a little commuter college. And now they're like, oh, wait, we want to be a big university. That's not the kind of town we are. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Virginia Hernandez Reza, 2447 Jefferson Avenue. Okay, I'm going to try and be nice. Anyway, I'm just going to talk very quickly on Weber State. I'm hearing these different comments because I was born here. Weber State campus, as she was saying, was right there on Jefferson. That's where I live. It was just a small, so they move up there. Yes, things have changed, but I want to touch on that because from my understanding, being involved in this community from the inner city to West Ogden to Weber State, my understanding coming to these meetings when the previous mayor was here all the time. They got tired of hearing us, but they got used to us. And then now this mayor, they are using Ogden City, the inner city, they're building complexes there. townhouses. Our understanding was that since the new mayor came in, all these new buildings that are going on, apartments, they're supposed to be for the students. Now, right down from Jefferson, they have built a brand-new apartment complex. There are students going there. Not enough yet. And then they're going to build another one on Washington. That's almost done. Our understanding, it's for students, and it's affordable. So my concern is, so why are we making such a big deal that over here at Weber State, that this should be there? Okay, so I want to put that aside. Really quick. The reason why I did come to this meeting, you know I'm here. Okay, the reason why I came to, number one, Betty Sawyer, yes, she...
Virginia, this is input on the Weber State project.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so
Then
if
I'll
you want to do it
finish.
in public comment,
Okay, sorry.
coming up.
Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. But yeah, Weber State, my family's gone there. I even have a granddaughter. My grandsons have just recently, but they're from either in Riverdale or Roy. So they wanted to, see, and this is kind of difficult for us. They wanted to move into the campus on the campuses that they're renting now, but there wasn't enough. So I think they would say, these students are, I think it's a good idea. Maybe we can now rent some of these buildings or rooms so we can be right next door. So it's really, really hard thing for you guys to figure out what to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brad Brown, 719 West, 4350 South. I grew up in this community, and I remember in high school people would refer to Weber State as Harrison High, and it was kind of, not looked on as prestigiously as some of the others. And but I did graduate from Weber, and I know that it's better. I know it's not second rate. And now I'm a commercial real estate broker, and a lot of what I do is convincing tenants, retail tenants, that Weber County is not second rate to Salt Lake County. We're just as good. And so I'm excited about that change in perception. I see it happening in Weber State. Weber State, is it's a first-rate school, and I think the same is with Ogden, and I'm excited for that change in perception. But I do worry about Adam Allred mentioned the perception of developers, as Ogden being not developer friendly, and I've seen in a lot of other projects that no, Ogden is very developer friendly and do great projects. But I have talked with many student housing developers that look on Ogden as kind of, well, if we can develop in Orem or in Logan, it makes a lot more sense, just because of the rules. It's easy to get things through. But being a native of this community, I do want to see the growth, and people coming into Ogden to seeing what Ogden has to offer. I have one comment. Dave DeYoung, who spoke before, Stevens, in your question, he said in 10 years he's had renters in his duplex there. He's only had 3 non-student renters, but he asked me to convey that. But again, I'm excited about this project, and I'm excited about the direction that Ogden's going. Thank you.
Mr. Brown?
Good evening. My name is Casey Keller. I'm actually the owner of Harrison Heights. I also own the land to the north of Harrison Heights. It's just currently zoned R5. And I own a fourplex that's on 3850 that has a cross-section of 3850 and Harrison Boulevard. So I'm concerned about a few of the things going on, and certainly can find out some of those things on another venue than this. But just a few of the things I want to touch on, mostly just what's been presented. First, I think the developers have done a good job trying to minimize the impact, and I don't think that can be overlooked in comparison to what's been going on. So I applaud their effort on that front. But a few things that were said about Harrison Heights. Our price points are start at $349 up to a private room at $449. So we're not in the $650 range that was presented. We also, our occupancy last semester was at 87%, not full and no room at the end. Believe me, I spent a lot of marketing trying to fill it up. And also, in the summer, we started out at 48%. The reason why those statistics need to be brought up is because we're wondering about how much is needed on the supply, and I know the university wants to shift some of that risk over to the private developers, and that's fine. I hope to take that same risk on the zone that I have at R5, where I can build 40 to 50 units, which could be less if you change the overlay zone. But right now, I don't think I think it's already zoned to the point where I can just go to planning commission and get it approved. So I'm hoping that doesn't get changed up. Just also the market occupancy for purpose student-built housing in the market right now, if you look at it over the entire year, is about 65%. Right now, the university is at 30% occupied. I was at 48. I was happy to stay above that average. And then 85% average during the school year, so there's still a lot of supply to absorb. And then one other concern, 3 related, will there be a street widening required at 3850? If so, that's where my little duplex, fourplex there gets impacted. And then will there be a sidewalk requirement, if this does get approved, along Harrison Boulevard, which I think will be important because right now I'm dealing with pedestrian traffic safety issues from Harrison Heights where the students are actually walking on the street. And if the sidewalk is required, how wide? So those are a few other things. One last point. Generally, parking ratios for student housing, I manage about 3,000 apartment units myself from NAU, UVU, and Weber State. And 0.7 is usually a requirement per bed, not per bedroom. Wondering if that was given some thought so we don't have overflow, because it will come. And students that are renting new apartments or renovated apartments like Harrison Heights, by the way, which looks awesome now. If you want to look at the website, it's not the Harrison Heights we used to know. 0.7 per bed is generally the minimum, and hate to see miscalculation on that, so please give that some thought. Thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Ryan Randall. I'm with Centerpoint Construction, the contractor on the project. I just kind of wanted to reiterate what Dan had already previously talked about, timing. We really feel that this is the right time for this project. And our estimators in our office are estimating that this project could take us, as Adam mentioned already, up to a year to get this process finished, which means we need to have this project finished before August of 2018. And so if we're going to move forward with this project, it's very important that we get it through as soon as possible. And I really just want to speak on behalf of these guys. We work with a lot of different owners and developers, and these guys have been fantastic at reaching out to the community. They've asked for input. They've taken that, and it always hasn't benefited them, obviously, to take that risk on themselves to make changes to their building and to try to accommodate the neighbors. They've also done a feasibility study to make sure that this is something that's going to work for them. which Adam already presented, and the traffic study. I mean, we've tried to cover all the bases to make sure that this is something that'll be a win-win for everybody.
Thank you. Any other input? All right, we had a couple of questions. I just want to, Mr. Montgomery, if you could come back up and talk about, there were two main questions that came up, and if I miss them, widening of the road, and it came up twice, but I think one was on
3850.
Yeah, 3850. Were they both on 3850 though? Yeah, you're on Brinker, is that correct?
We're on Brinker, and like Brinker's right here, and then 38 is right here. It's right around 3800.
Oh, well, 3800 in Brinker. So there's two spots, 3850 and then that 3800.
So there are no plans to widen either one of those streets, 3850 or 3800 in Brinker. They would stay in their same configuration. The other question about sidewalk along Washington Boulevard, that would be required.
Harrison, yeah.
I mean Harrison, yes, sorry. That'd be required along the property's frontage. So that would have to be installed. The question about...
and is that the developer's responsibility then?
Yes. Now, that only is along his frontage, though, so whether we'd have to do other extensions separately would be a project that Public Works would have to take a look at or look at some other means, but the developer would be required to install along his frontage. So the question was, is there a connection all the way across? There is not. All the way along Harrison Boulevard, there's not a sidewalk all that length, but they would have to install their portion at this point. There's a question about the calculation on parking per bedroom or per occupant. That's depending on which city you're in, they look at it differently. Some do 0.7 or even 1 per bedroom. They also, some do 1 per bedroom plus 0.25 to look at visitor parking. Others look at per occupant and set that standard of parking. So why we chose in our recommendation the 0.7 per bedroom was the idea of using both the BRT as it takes place or transit systems plus walking distance and factoring that in as a balance between creating too much parking that then sits vacant, and as the concern was mentioned earlier, other people then take advantage of it, and trying to balance that out in terms of amount of land needed and hard surface versus landscaping. And the 0.7 was what we felt per bedroom as a balancing out of those who will have cars versus some of those who may not have cars and use transit systems.
Mr. Montgomery, also, Bob Lauer brought up, and I think it doesn't matter if it's this project or not, this is an issue that needs to be fixed, is the sewer issues on 37th Street and the sinkhole and the dip in the road. And
now, in my discussions with individuals in Public Works, there had been past problems, but according to what I had heard, those had been fixed and resolved in terms of what they call a belly, and that had been fixed and taken care of. So it's not a problem anymore, but if there are other things I'm not aware of, and I don't know if Mr. Lauder has any information other than, I know there were some past things that got resolved, but...
even if we look at it again.
Yeah, we will look at it.
Okay.
And to look at it. Mrs. Peterson asked about having some trees removed. There's not going to
No,
plans
there's no
for,
proposal to...
no reason for any trees to be removed? either?
Right.
Okay.
What about the construction? Will they have to follow some guidelines along those lines there?
Well, the city does have in their ordinance construction timeframes of when construction take place. And if I recall, I want to say it's 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Is it 7 a.m.? I'm not quite sure. I just know that when they talked about the 5:30, I knew that was not according to ordinance, but again, sometimes that happens. We've heard that at BDO also, and had some of those discussions of time frames. But I know the ordinance has a set time frame of construction will only be within these hours, and they are supposed to mitigate dust, which is a health issue. And again, if those things aren't happening, then those are things that we need to be called on so we can enforce those.
Heard, that these developers have been very responsible and trying to be responsible for the citizens, but, if this passes, I would encourage them to listen to the comments that Marcy made, not, mitigate the dust, mitigate the noise, do what they can so that the neighborhood's not impacted as much.
Will the construction trucks use 38 South or Brinker, or how will they go into the site?
I don't know. I don't know those have been determined yet.
Huh?
38th.
So you'll use 3850? Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have one about parking. When they said that, mentioned that, hey, we have an event up to Weber State and the parking is full, just come down and park at our place down there. Does the developer have in place a mechanism by which to tell which cars are legal and which are not in the parking lot there?
Yeah, so they'll have permits, like we'll issue permits for each student, so they'll have to have that posted in their car on the windshield or their back.
Okay.
And then, unfortunately, we'll probably have booters that will come and boot if you do not have a permit, and so it stinks. I hate those, but that's kind of the best way to keep that.
We have a new strict signage rule, just an FYI.
We all know that when there's big events at Weber State, fireworks and other things that
Dan Stevens, one of the developers.
People take up parking any little spot they can find.
But 0.7 per bedroom isn't a whole lot of parking there.
No, it's not.
Questions?
Yeah, we've heard a lot and asked a lot of questions. It's been a long process leading up to us too. Anxious to hear feedback from council members, kind of where some thoughts they might have.
And if you don't mind, can we take a 5-minute break? Would that be okay
That'd be
with
awesome.
you guys up here?
Yeah.
And I know that's a long night for you guys, but it would give me an opportunity to just take a break.
I'm going to be able to do it faster than 5.
All right, thank you. We'll be right back. Well, thanks for staying. All right, so we've received input, and we are now on to
If we might have some discussion prior to voting on these, I think it would be well, since this has been kind of a complicated issue for quite a long time, and we've heard many points of view. So I think it would be well, and if I don't necessarily need to start out, but I do have a few comments, so.
You can start or I can start. I got plenty of comments. But.
Okay, I have some foundational concerns that don't have much to do with this particular development, this particular proposal. Goes back to the community plan amendment. When we do community plans, neighbors come together, they discuss what they want their neighborhood to look like, how they want it to function, how they want it to, how they want it to work. Everybody, of course, doesn't get all their way, but it does come together, and then it coheses and starts to work. And so that process of changing a community plan, of adopting amendments to a community plan, it needs to be a good balance of the needs between the neighbors, the city, and in this case, the university. I think this thing needs to be a stellar development that buffers the neighbors and their needs, as well as, the university, when we had the open house, it was stated that it was important for them. The reason they were kind of wanting this kind of a change is they wanted to be able to attract students from out of the area and out of state, and in some cases, international students as well. As nice as an apartment might be, I don't think that in itself is going to attract anyone to come to Weber State. And so I listen to the people whose lifestyle is going to change, and I weigh that in. The Planning Commission, when they reviewed this, said it was important that any university housing component, it should be off of Harrison. Well, the only thing this thing shares with Harrison is a curb. It interacts and it enters and exits through the neighborhood. It actually bumps into a residential street, even though there's not 24-hour access there. It's right into the neighborhood, and I'm concerned about that. I think if this project were a little larger, if they were able to acquire the properties along Harrison that would allow them to have access onto Harrison, it could work. But that's not the case in this one. If the council wants to approve this, I think that we ought to shrink the amendment to the community to this site only, so that we can be proactive and look at a corridor plan that would state certain amenities and certain other things that would make a project like this more complete, that would be that attraction for Weber State. I think that's an important thing. I'm with Brad, and that we need to make sure that we keep that thing in mind. That's an important component to this. With respects to the change in the definition of a family or the number of people per unit, just having an ordinance with no intended enforcement is like not having any. I just don't think that works. I think we need to make sure that there is some kind of an enforcement method in place, an audit perhaps of that the city does with the property manager every time there's a semester change where people move in and out. I think that's an important thing. Otherwise, I'm not too excited about changing our definition of a family for this purpose. In as much as really all it is an apartment building with proximity to Weber State. I do appreciate, however, the developers and their trying to mitigate all these things that they've heard. I don't blame them. I really don't. I think the process came together in a kind of a wonky way. So was wonky a real word? Is that? But and so it kind of got reverse engineered, and I don't think that's the best way for cities to plan. So if this is if the desire of the council is to pass this, I hope we will at least shrink that that corridor to this site specific, and I think we are able to do that because it's a shrinking of it, not an expansion. And then I think it's important that we, with the administration, stakeholders from Weber State, our own, community development department, we have some smart people that work for the city. We can all come together and find some way to make sure that these projects do meet a specific requirement that will be an attraction to students that live out of the area, that will buffer the needs of the residents nearby, will have safe access across a very busy street to the university, so we don't have problems like we've had down on Wall. So that's my thoughts on this matter. Whoever's next.
Mr. White, if you don't mind.
Sure.
This project is the project that, the proposal that doesn't stop giving, is it? We're all still here. I know that we're struggling with the long hours today on this, but I recognize and empathize with all of the long hours that have gone before tonight. I want to recognize that I don't blame the developers either. I think I commend the developers, actually. The neighborhood has certainly been in opposition to what you've proposed, and you've made every reasonable concession that you can, I think, and that needs to be noted. I also I want to respect the commitment of the neighborhood. I think that Mr. Daniels, you made the comment that your concerns have been ignored and the concerns of the neighborhood have been ignored. I disagree respectfully. I know that you've had a lot of frustration though, and I just want you to know that we've recognized it. A lot of folks have recognized it. We've been in touch a lot. I want to thank you for being a very reasonable and approachable party for the neighborhood, and that you've conveyed a lot of concerns from people to me, and that's weighed heavily on me. I've only made one commitment to you, and it's that I'd be an honest and good faith ear for you to talk to you, and I hope you feel that way in spite of your concerns today and proceeding tonight. There's been a lot of information. I've attended planning commission meetings, read a lot of notes. I've met with neighbors, talked with neighbors. I've talked and met with the developer. I've met with Weber State. I've talked to a lot of folks about this and gathered a lot of information, and it's difficult to make a decision when you're stuck with this kind of polar opposites of opinion. And I think that the reason we have landed in this position sort of echoes some sentiment that Vice Chair Heyer mentioned, which is the fact that we lack a student housing master plan, so to speak. I don't think any of us can deny the need, or some comments by the Harrison Heights owner may be an exception, but I don't think we can deny the need for student housing here in town. This is something that we need to take very seriously. I think that the past iterations and efforts by previous councils and previous commissions are indicative of the struggle that has gone on in this community for too long dealing with this issue. And I wish that we were sitting here today reviewing a proposal that fit within a master planned proposal, a broader proposal. I think that where we've gotten today, we've had such a hard time, we've struggled so far along the way. I think that we've arrived at this point because this project has pushed us to. And that speaks to the importance of private investment in this community, which I value, and I don't like hearing comments that Ogden's not developer friendly. That really worries me, and I don't want this project to add to that by any means. But I feel like the corridor plan that's in our consideration today is a step toward a master plan for student housing. But I've learned in my short time here that master plans get a lot more consideration than this one has. And they go through a completely different process. And in a perfect world, I wish that we were at the tail end of that process considering this project now. We're not. So we need to make a practical decision based on where we're at. And being rather divided on this proposal in front of us, and I know this petitioner needs an answer, I think I'll be speaking on behalf of the interests of the neighborhood. And I'll conclude my comments here by saying that I really don't think that this vote, regardless of how it goes, is the end of this issue. That's just the beginning of this. If we build this project and we prove this project, we still have a lot of work to do, like Vice Chair Heyer mentioned, on a master plan for student housing in this community, period. If we don't build this proposal, then I would push for an aggressive approach toward bringing all the parties together to create such a plan, then to invite development such as that we're seeing today. Thank you.
I'd like to just take just a few minutes. First of all, I'd like to thank the developers for, number one, recognizing a need. Number two, wanting to work in Ogden City and to work in our community. It wasn't long ago when I first got on the council that we were begging people to come to Ogden and work, and to see you guys all sit there and hear you express your desire to be here and to work here. It proves how far Ogden's come, and I appreciate your willingness and your the risks and chances that you're taking to come here, so thank you. I'd also like to thank, and we can just thank Brad for now, and thank Brad and WSU for the partner that they've been with our city. They've always worked closely with the city, and they've been a great partner, and I'd like to thank Brad and Weber State for that. I probably live closer to Weber State than 95% of the people here, so I know exactly what the impacts for Weber State are and what they can be, and without looking at my notes and trying to decide which Mr. Allred I'm referring to, I'm just going to say that I agree with many of the Mr. Allreds in the room. When we bought our house, that was one of the things that both excited me. It was exciting to be there by the football field and to be by the vibe that Weber State provides, all the activities and the different things going on. But yet I was really worried about the traffic counts and stuff like that. People parking in my street. I actually live at the Triangle, Jason, so I know right where you park. And just like, again, one of the Allreds mentioned, I've never had any issues. There's cars parked in front of my street or in front of my home when I'm gone, but when I come home from work, those cars are gone, and it's a win-win for both of us. They have somewhere to park, and I have, and it doesn't affect me at all. And when I need my parking and for family activities, it's usually the weekends, and they're not there. So I've always had nothing but a great relationship with those students that choose to park on my street and choose to use our street for that. I also recently had my house up for sale. And if you don't think that students or people want to put students on your street, it's coming. Most of the people that looked at my home wanted to rent it out to students. And because of that, not because of that, but other issues and other things, we didn't sell our house yet, but Weber State is a great value, and Weber State is a great institution, and it's going to continue to grow. And just like was mentioned, those students are going to need somewhere to live. And Weber State knows it. Developers know it. Rental property people own it or know it, and they're going to take the opportunities that they can to get those students in there. So I agree again with one of the Allreds that I had Weber State students who lived next to me in a home, and I had the same experiences that they had. It was a nice home that became very uncared for, and I would rather an opportunity to house those students in a controlled environment where the amenities that they need and the amenities that they are looking for are provided for them. I think that's a better fit, not only for Weber State but also for the surrounding neighborhoods. And so I'm glad that there's a project like this on the table, and I agree that there are some things that need to be addressed, and like was mentioned, this isn't the end all, but I am thankful for all those that were involved, and just like to thank those that have had a hand in this.
I'm going to be very brief because the hour's getting late, but I just want to thank all of you for being here and letting us hear your voice. For the Daniels family and Lowers, I've known Bob for a long time. Thank you for bringing up your issues, and some of the issues that were brought up were really not even issues that were specific to this project, as I mentioned, just issues that people have in their neighborhoods. And continue to make your voice heard. We truly do want to hear from you and pay attention to what you're telling us. So thank you.
I have a question and a suggestion and some brief comment. The question I have is if we do a study on the sewer and it comes back as a problem, how do we handle that? Does that need to be taken care of, and when can that study be done? When would you be looking at this sewer up there?
To look at what was brought up tonight, we'll be looking at it tomorrow.
Tomorrow. So we should pretty well know whether it's good or bad, and if there's needs to be repairs, how's that handled?
I'm unaware of any problem up in that area. I don't recall it being on any of our weekly or bi-weekly maintenance areas. So we'll look in it tomorrow and we can get that information to you.
Okay, thank you. The suggestion I have is we have three proposals. Would like to shrink that corridor down to 4,400. I think that's practical, and I think what we ought to do is look at Councilman Heyer's ideas to shrink that down and to look at it. So, if it falls within some of these proposed ordinances, then we need to make those type of amendments to secure that operation. But the other thing is that community plans are here to strengthen the community. We enjoy, at least I do, the input from the citizens because it's their community, and they like to, as stated before, they have a passion, as I do, for my own community there. I relate quite well to Jason when he says he's a fifth-year senior at Weber State University. When I was going up there, when I got to the time when I was graduating up there, that was a great day for me, but I also recall that I had to find every day where I could park my car because it was very difficult, so I relate quite well. The thing that I'm concerned with is, number one, protecting the community. That's the number one essence of what we need to do. But also, we need to look into the future. I think the conditional overlay puts some restrictions into this project that is controllable. And that's what I look at. Weber State is not going to get smaller. But do we do that to impact a community and a neighborhood? I don't think Weber State wants that. I think they want to work with the neighbors all around them. And so some way with the proposal, with the ordinances tonight, if we can develop some aspects to that we can work with the neighbors and develop a cohesive proposal that would be workable and controllable is a solution that we ought to examine very closely. Again, I thank you for being here.
Councilmember Stevens, I heard you say that you'd like to shrink the area down. I think what I heard Vice Chair Heyer was to only have it as on this space that they are proposed right now.
But can we do both of those at the time? I'm not sure. Maybe we need to study that corridor, see if
that's my proposal, is that we leave the corridor, the community plan amendment to only this site until it's studied. That's my proposal.
So really shrink it down.
Right. But I think it's important for us to look at that corridor and not make it as wide or as long as it is, and so that it would enhance the opportunities there.
And I'll follow up by saying that I have been fairly vocal on this, that we do need a university neighborhood overlay, and that, a lot of things that we've just talked about, promoting the high density yet still protecting that single family neighborhood should be our goal. You've said this over and over, and, establishing design criteria and height restrictions and streetscapes and landscapes and those kind of things. And I think that's all part of that university neighborhood overlay. What I realized tonight is that something still can be built there, and it can be big and hairy and scary, just something different. So that also made me look at this a little bit differently. I'm on the opposite end of you, which sometimes happens, but I don't mind the number of unrelated family members, and I don't know that 4 is the right number. Should it be 5? Should it be? And so I'm kind of to the point where we haven't studied that enough, maybe, or even given it thought until Mr. Montgomery has, pointed out that it could be 4, it could be 5. So,
if I might just inject, that is also my view. With a comprehensive vision, it may be more than that, if it was the right kind of a project. But until we have that and that there's the safeguards in place, I think I'm uneasy. That's where I am.
Can I add to that? And I think I agree. I am uneasy, and part of the reason I'm uneasy is I feel like we've backed into this proposal through this project, and I don't know if 4 is the right number. Maybe it is 5. 4 is the number that's needed today. That number has changed from time to time in the past, and we keep vacillating based on what's in front of us, or are we vacillating based on what the need is? I don't know. I have no idea. That's where my concern rests, is that I want those questions answered, just like we do when we review every development. We look to see if it fits within the community plan, and the community plan has been vetted, and it's gone through a really rigorous process that's included comments and dialogue with the neighbors from day one in a manner that's clear and transparent from day one, that we're not going back and trying to make up ground. Then, once that decision's made, we can review these proposals within that context. And I think that's the appropriate manner in which we should be considering these developments. We cannot deny the fact that we have to address this. Weber State needs us to, and we along with Weber State, both need to find success for one another. I think that we've had largely a very ceremonial relationship at times, and we've all agreed that we need to be working lock and step with Weber State. I think this is the issue where we've got to put our relationships and our shared vision to work. We've got work to do, and we've got to do it together, and it's going to be harder than passing a resolution and a charter, but for me personally, I feel very strongly, I stand here very committed to doing that, and I think that I gather that Weber State is, I gather that the community would be too, and I hope that the development community would be as well. But that's where my reservations lie.
One other concern, and I'll just bring this up, and I think it was brought up about the percentage of students in each of the housing units that we have right now. And I think one of the things, we're on the front end of Weber State doing a marketing plan or some way to get these students. We know that Weber State will grow. I thought was a great study. But what are those students, and who are those students, and do they want housing, and those kinds of things haven't really been outlined. And no disrespect to you sitting in the back there, Brad, but I think just some assurances that what they're really thinking, is going to happen. And so I think that was one other piece of the puzzle for me on this. I don't have any other comments to that. So, yeah.
Nope.
Okay. So there's three different ordinances here. We can start with the first one and move through them all. They're
Madam Chair, can I just maybe make a clarifying point? The discussion about narrowing the area to this property specifically, the community plan amendment and the rezone really are just for these properties that are the subject properties. So I think what Vice Chair Heyer is talking about and what some of the other comments are really pertains to the third item, which is the student housing definition and what the geographic boundaries are of that. I think as far as the technical point, that's where that change would have to be made.
Okay.
So from 35th Street to 48th Street is in the third.
Yeah, to whatever it is you all decide, yeah. But that's where that,
Plan changes are only for this piece of property.
they're specific to these properties already.
So that the
Thank
first
you for that
proposed
clarification.
ordinance.
I was misunderstood then. So,
And then the second one, just to make sure, is to take and I apologize, it's getting late, you can tell. To take the second one to the back half there off of, on Brinker, or the one that's on Brinker, to make it an.
The second one is the rezone, and the rezone would apply to all of them to take that from the R16 and the PI to that R5 with the conditional overlay. And just a note on that, as we talked about in the work session, if you want to make the other changes that were talked about with the concept plan and the development agreement changes, that would be a substitute to that. So just approval with the substitute development agreement and concept plan. And we do have those available, some hard copies if folks want those as well.
There's mine.
pretty clear.
So Chair White, with that, I'll start with number one, which I think is the easiest one. I'll make a motion that we adopt proposed ordinance 2017-30.
I second it.
We have a motion by Councilmember Garner, second by Councilmember Stevens to adopt the proposed ordinance 2017-30. This is a roll call vote, sorry.
Councilmember Garner.
Aye.
Councilmember Nadolski.
No.
Councilmember Stevens.
Aye.
Councilmember Blair.
Aye.
Vice Chair Heyer.
No.
Chair White.
No.
That fails.
It's a tie vote that will make it.
It fails.
Let's, so you're entertaining a second motion, I assume? I'll make a motion that we not adopt proposed ordinance 2017-30.
Second.
We have a motion by did you say 30? I'm sorry. Yeah,
Correct.
Okay. We have a motion by Councilmember Nadolski and second by Vice Chair Heyer to not adopt proposed ordinance 2017-30. This is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Nadolski.
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens.
No.
Councilmember Blair.
No.
Councilmember Garner. Vice Chair Heyer.
Aye.
Chair White.
Aye. That too fails.
Can, we need to reach resolution. Can you clarify your prior remarks, Vice Chair Heyer, about limiting the scope of the approval tonight?
Well, let me say this. I think your motion, the failure of the first motion was what your motion was. So it failed.
They both failed, therefore the petition failed?
Yes.
I guess technically if you don't change the community plan, then the other ones are therefore inconsistent with the community plan. At least the second one is, the rezone.
Still needed a motion to go through the.
The other two? Are there additional motions, or does it
You can talk to Janine about, if you want to revote or.
A revote on the first one?
Does anybody want to change their vote?
Seek legal counsel here for a moment.
The legal's talking about that.
Okay. Is there anything on the first one that you want to change, knowing that they've both failed?
What?
Well, you have to vote on the third one first, right?
Go down the line. Still go down the roll order.
Yeah, so there's not a technical requirement that the rezone be consistent with the community plan. That's just generally good planning practice. So at least in my opinion, you would have to still vote on the rezone because you could do that still independently of the community plan. The third one can also be done independent of the other two. So I believe you would still need to take a vote on all three.
In light of the even number of council members and the split votes, is there opportunities for additional motions that are different from the proposed ordinance as presented?
You can add amendments.
Such as the
Geographical boundary or.
Might be helpful if you all understood why you voted the way you did to see if there's a way that it can be cured.
Did anybody not say why they voted the way they did already?
Well, my comments are that I think I've made my comments clear about the process and things being backwards. What I'm wondering is if there is more middle ground to be considered. That's why I'm asking.
Well, I'm really hopeful that, now I don't know what the developer would do, but I would be highly motivated to get on this process and work through it at an expedited pace so that we can, and in that event, if we finally come up with this, perhaps they'll have a project that they can do based on the new criteria, but I don't know.
What is this first ordinance telling us? What are we voting on, the area and the map?
Well, as far as the next two items on the agenda, it would seem to me to be a little bit reckless to go ahead and do a rezone on that property in light of that other one failing. And I guess you could feel one way or the other about that definition of student housing as far as how many students are in a unit, but I think that also ought to come with the vision.
Well, that's where I guess I'm confused, is we were trying to vote on just this project.
Right.
And part of it after that is to give direction to say after this, let's come up with a community master plan. And so, what you want to think about is, are you voting on just this project? And then we want to work on a community master plan for that corridor along Harrison.
Yeah, but the community master plan is not on our agenda yet.
That's what I'm telling you.
That's what we're saying.
But your arguments keep coming back saying, I don't want to vote this until we have a community master plan.
Right, which I hope we'll get right on.
It's going to take some time to do that.
It will take a little time.
It'll take a lot of time.
I don't know what that is. I think Neil had his comments are very interesting, is that we're looking at this project. We're not looking at the community plan. We're looking at this project that's placed before us.
True. I'm not sure I understand what your point is.
Well, if we want to look at the community plan, it's going to take quite a while to develop amendments to the community plan.
I would agree. I don't think there's any expedite in those words.
I think as opposed to waiting before we start. I think we start. I think we get started.
Well, I agree
That's-
with
That's
that.
what I'm saying. I mean, there are things when we do some of these things, sometimes we don't start for 2 years. This one, I think we should start on it right away.
I don't disagree with that.
That's kind of
I'm just
why
saying.
I say expedite it.
If you want to wait for the community plan before you do this, it's going to take us a while to do that.
Yeah.
Take a little while. True.
The question was, do we approve this project, this petition, before we have that community plan?
Correct.
Exactly. No, 3 of us voted yes. So by,
I think what we're doing is looking at this project
Singly.
I agree. I am.
Chair White, may I just interject? I mean, maybe Mr. Symes can chime in, but my guess is to work on a community plan, to get it in place, you're still doing budget, you've got summer coming up. I mean, you're looking at 3-4 months. So I don't know what that does to their timeline, but effectively, I mean, in doing that, based on comments from the developer, that may change significantly what they do at this site. So I think you need to take that into consideration. I think the real issue is, do you want this project to go forward or not at this point?
I think it's going to take a long time to get that community plan.
Well, and I want to go
There's
back.
no guarantee.
Yeah, and I want to go back to a comment that Chair White made, that we've been made aware that Weber State is going to start a major campaign to recruit out-of-state students. And I think we want that big part. We may want to wait and see what some of those results are as part of that community plan, and that's going to take some time also.
I guess in the meantime, there will be something built on that.
Yes. We're at an impasse unless somebody else is saying they want to.
Maybe just interject one more thing. Mr. Symes indicates that even though you haven't approved the amendment to the community plan, and it may not be good planning practice, you could have still, if you approved the zoning and the change to the definition of a family, technically the project could still go forward. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about those other 2 votes.
So I'll go back to my original comment, and that is that I agree with Councilmember Nadolski that we backed into this and that we don't have a good university neighborhood overlay, that we haven't done a good job of defining that definition of how we incorporate that high density in with single-family dwellings. Although the developer has done a great job of trying to work with the group, the houses around there and the families around there. So I don't want to dismiss that fact. And some of the things that I'm most concerned about are not related to this project in particular. It's more about the community plan and what we are doing backwards. And so this is a one chance to do it forward. And so I don't have heartache with the plan. I don't have heartache with the development. I don't have heartache with building on Harrison. So I'm probably a little more lenient on those issues than it sounds like both Vice Chair Heyer and Councilmember Nadolski. So with that, and I don't like the fact that we would change the community plan just for this project, but I might be amenable to the next 2 as a starting point for you guys to think about on that.
Can I add to your comment? I know the confusion's aplenty tonight. This confusion's exactly why we come about these projects differently. But we don't work in a perfect world, and we sometimes have to make decisions based on the information we're dealt, and that's exactly what the position we're in tonight. Is there any logic, since we're at a split and essentially undecided, to table this to a time certain and come back, regroup, and make a final decision soon? It sounds like we have multiple pathways available to us. I'm just putting it out there as an option. I don't personally like that we're so divided and undecided. And if I'm hearing that there's maybe some leeway back and forth, I think that we owe a good decision to the developer, to the neighborhood, to the community, to Weber State, our partners. So I'm asking if there's a procedural opportunity to do that.
What date would be available to table that to?
Well, I think it partly depends on what you want to do in the meantime, and how long that would take. We hadn't scheduled a meeting for the 27th, but we could schedule a meeting for the 27th. We were going to have an extended work session. We could do it then. The trouble is in July, you have one meeting in July, and that's July 11th.
I think July is too long.
Yeah, I agree.
So what are we gonna
Yeah, what's the-
have to do?
Or you
What
can
do you wanna
revote.
do?
Or revote tonight.
I don't know whether our votes would change, personally.
Yeah, there is always the option for a motion to reconsider, and since you're both on the failing side, anyone could make
Anyone
that.
can make it.
But there's no use doing it if someone's not willing to change.
Well, it sounds like maybe that there's some opportunity to look at, maybe I misunderstood that it was, a narrow focus, or you did, or at least in your comments, I don't know.
With the geography of the thing? Well, I understood that was part of the community plan amendment, that's where that definition, or that's where that corridor length was stated, but Mr. Symes says it's in the definition of the student housing, the 4 people per dwelling unit. But yeah, I think if we're going to proceed with this, that it should just apply only to this development, so that we can master plan a larger area. But I still think this is what I'm concerned that if we do this one, it will start to set a precedent for something in the future, that maybe we'll be reactive to this instead of be proactive. And that's kind of where I sit.
I don't see, using your terms, why we couldn't move forward with this project. As I've mentioned earlier, I believe we have a good project. I think everyone's fine with the project. I think we've got a good team, and then try to be proactive as we move forward with the community plan. And maybe we could use an expedited timeline on that.
Well, part of my statement was, and I'm only one vote, and I realize that, is that this really isn't the right project, because it does encroach in the neighborhood. It feeds the neighborhood. It doesn't interact with Harrison, which is kind of interesting, since that's what the community plan amendment does require, but this one doesn't really do it.
Be nice to have them access on Harrison, but that's not the case. But I
there
think we
were
ought to
some
look
years
at
ago, we
project
had
itself.
a proposal for, I think, a convenience store down on North Street and Washington, and there were some little remnant parcels that were kind of there, And we took the stance, this was when I was on the planning commission, we took the stance that, you know, it needed to be a good project. It needed to have that whole piece of property. And we said, that when you can acquire all the property and bring a development that is a quality development, then we'll consider that. And they did. And it's much better than a convenience store there today. And that's kind of what I'm thinking here is with kind of raise the bar. I think we need to raise the bar. This bar isn't that high. So
we're all in agreement that we need a master plan. We're not in agreement as to when and how at this point and how we address this proposal in front of us today.
Correct.
Correct. Because we have all said that we do want a master plan, but it's going to take some time for us to do it and to do it correctly. And that's the goal.
What would, I'm not a planner. What would a master plan change about this property moving forward? I don't know. That's what I'm struggling with.
I don't think it's going to do anything with this particular piece of property, but it's going to address the concern that Chair Heyer or Vice Chair Heyer said for any future things that may come, that we do have a plan, that it's not just the doors are open to any project that comes in.
Your point's well taken. If we have a master plan, we're going to put a development in there, and it's going to be student housing, and we're going to have 4 students in a bedroom. And
the only difference that I guess the only improvement I could see that would help the neighborhood is that we'd get access and ingress egress on Harrison, which would be a big improvement. Is it possible that could still happen?
And we're always going to be working with UDOT.
And I think we'll probably, actually, Harrison, and depending on how far we look, but I bet you we'll encounter that same thing all up and down that corridor.
Oh, absolutely. The thing that we have not looked at is our BRT route and how that might affect student housing. Certainly, that's going to be a big thing to students to have access to that transit. So, its proximity to that is going to be something that we'd have to look at. Students all eat and they do their laundry. Of course, they've talked about the laundry issue, but they all need to be entertained, and they gather, so they need a gathering place. And I don't know what's involved in some of the things that some universities do to make their attractive and successful, but that's what I think you should look at when you do a master plan or a visioning process.
Sure, and that can be part of it.
Mm-hmm. And I would, well, enough said.
So options for us are, we can consider a revote or.
And let me just ask this question before you answer. So I go back to what Councilmember Nadolski said. We can't dictate what goes in there, I guess.
It's true.
We can't. And so I guess we can't dictate some of those amenities if you.
That's true. Not on this one. That's kind of why I think this one's ahead of its time.
On any of them, really. I mean, I guess.
Oh, you're sure you could?
Mixed use, I guess.
Yeah, you can. In a master planning document, you can.
All right, Rebecca.
So Chair White, I would propose that we do take a revote if you are, and I'll try proposed ordinance 2017-30 again.
Second it.
We have a motion for the third time. I don't know what that does.
Did you change your motion at all?
Yeah, any?
Not on the first one.
Then I have, I guess.
And that's not, because the geographical boundary is on the third proposal, correct?
And so legal, what's the precedent for just rehashing the same motion over again?
Well, we both lost.
So we can keep going
Yeah, you can
until-
keep going. Anyone can do it.
So the motion didn't carry each time, and so it's not that you both lost. It's the motion didn't carry, and so the proposition lost. And as far as revoting again and again, I don't think your rules specifically comment on that. But it is unusual.
count on that from this council, apparently.
Madam Chair, if I could just maybe add one more thing also. If the geographic boundary is the issue, you can take the third ordinance first and narrow that how you see fit, and then take the community plan and the rezone after that. We put these in this order simply because this is the order in which they came. But there's nothing to prevent you from taking a vote on the zone text amendment first. And if that's your concern, if Vice Chair Heyer's concern is making sure it doesn't go past some certain geographic area, and you want to take care of that first before you move to the other ones, you certainly could do that.
Let me ask a question with regards to that, though. This is dealing with the number of students per unit, right? And if this whole thing were to pass with a 4-student per dwelling unit, and after we do the master plan, it ends up being 6, what's going to happen then? It's going to be built for 4 students. Well, I know, but they're going to have already built their building.
Well, it could be up to that, because you may have units that are less than, so it could be up to 6 students. Doesn't say it has to be at least, minimum 6.
This just says 4.
And Planning Commission, I guess, said 6-0, right? If that was for 4 students.
At 4, on the second vote.
They denied it.
And I guess,
Well, no,
Vice Chair Heyer, what I'm trying to say is you may have some student housing that's built for 4.
Right.
And you may have some that's built for 6. And even though your master plan says up to 6, I don't think that's going to adjust.
Right. I'm kind of curious as to what Harrison Heights is built for. How many students do you have per dwelling unit? Okay, thanks.
Because at times, some of those apartments may only have 2, some
sure.
may have
Yeah,
3.
no. Right.
My children have lived in student housing, especially the summer months.
So you have a motion?
And a second.
So I have a motion by Councilmember Garner and second by Councilmember Nadolski.
Blair.
Blair, I'm sorry. It's over there.
Yeah.
To reconsider proposed ordinance 2017-30, and that would be to adopt, correct?
Correct.
Another roll call vote.
Councilmember Blair.
Aye.
Councilmember Garner.
Aye.
Councilmember Nadolski.
No.
Councilmember Stevens.
Aye.
Vice Chair Heyer.
No.
Chair White.
Aye, that passes. I do want to comment on why I changed my vote, if I will, if I could, please. Sorry.
It was 42.
4-2.
I said
voted
aye.
aye.
I changed my vote.
Do you want to clarify that vote?
I have Councilmember Blair with aye, Councilmember Gardner with aye, Councilmember Nadolski, no, Councilmember Stevens, no.
No.
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens is an aye.
If I could clarify why I changed my vote tonight, the reasoning why I didn't think that this was the right thing is because we don't have a university neighborhood overlay. And I realize that something will be built there. And I think the developer has done a good job with working with the community. And those were not my issues. My issues had to do with the community plan itself. And now that it's just narrow in scope, then I'm fine with that.
Okay, so with this, I'm going to jump to proposed ordinance 2017-32 and to propose that we adopt.
32 or 31?
32. To adopt it with the change to amend this to within the geographical boundary that was in the original map for the project.
Clarify that, I didn't.
Greg, the boundaries are from 38th to...
So you're doing the student housing definition?
Yeah, number.
Councilmember Garner, maybe I could just read that into what that says. So in the proposed ordinance, it's 15-13-40 in the zoning ordinance. Paragraph A, it says the building or buildings shall be on one lot or parcel with frontage on Harrison Boulevard and located between 35th Street and 4800 South. So that's the part that you would need to change.
Right. So 35th Street to...
Mr. Montgomery had recommended 4400 South. I'm not sure how Vice Chair Heyer feels about that.
Site was specific.
Right, and you were saying just to, not quite Country Hills, not even to the
No,
KD
I was saying
site.
to this site specific.
Right.
So those
And
lots.
on the map, it's just the, why I said it the way I did, it was just the plan for the development.
So that's what your intention is to, for this specific project.
Correct. Right, and then we do the community plan. We had asked the administration to follow up on getting us a timeline for the community plan.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, maybe if I could just
Clarify, please.
say addresses, if you want to change that language, I think, and Mr. Montgomery can correct me if I get these addresses wrong, but if you want to narrow it just to that scope and keep that same language, I would say, something located between 38th and 3850. That would narrow it to that little section right there.
So I would propose that we narrow it just to the project of 38 to 3850, and with the challenge or proposal to
Correction.
administration to help us get moving forward on a community plan.
That would include that duplex that's on the corner, however.
Would.
So what if we just had it be the actual address of this property?
3801 Harrison.
801 Harrison.
I'm amenable to that, so I would adjust that amendment or proposal to that.
So we have a,
I
I don't have. a
Madam
second.
Chair, maybe if we could get clarification on that issue. I think part of the development agreement indicates that all those parcels have to be combined into one. Maybe Greg can help me on this one. Is there a better address or a better way to say that in your view?
I think if, just so I'm understanding which one you're talking about now. So right now you're talking about the student housing definition. Okay. So if that is the intent, I think it would be to clarify that 3801 would be, quote, the Harrison address. And the requirement is that all properties be combined into one parcel.
That will be.
And that would become that address. So I think you just clarify that combine the four properties proposed into one parcel at 3801 Harrison.
I'm good with that, so we'll propose that we combine the four properties proposed to 3801 Harrison with direction to move forward with the master plan.
I second it.
Motion by Councilmember Garner, second by Councilmember Stevens, to adopt proposed ordinance 2017-32
With the amendment,
with the amendment or with the
3801 Harrison.
38, with all properties being combined into that 3801 Harrison, which is only for that property only. And then the next part is the making sure that administration moves on the community plan.
We're going to vote on
So
this
Chair White,
motion.
can I clarify? So a community plan to me is
I
different
mean, I'm
than-
sorry,
Okay.
yeah,
A master
Master
plan
plan.
for
For the
student
housing.
housing in the area. Okay.
University Neighborhood Overlay Plan or something like that.
Ma'am.
Okay, got all that? All right, this is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Garner,
Aye.
Councilmember Nadolski,
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens,
Aye.
Councilmember Blair,
Aye.
Vice Chair Heyer,
Aye.
Chair White,
Aye, that passes.
We're almost done.
We
The
have
next one is just a zoning, if I'm correct. Mr. Symes, correct?
But we have a substitute.
With the substitute.
Development agreement. Want to try that one? Somebody?
I'll try that one. I would make a motion that we adopt ordinance 2017-31 with the amended development agreement for the conditional overlay.
Second.
A motion by Vice Chair Heyer, second by Councilmember Nadolski to adopt the proposed ordinance 2017-31. This is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Nadolski?
Aye.
Aye.
Councilmember Blair?
Aye.
Councilmember Gardner?
Aye.
Vice Chair Heyer?
Aye.
Chair White?
Aye. That passes. Thank you for a very long process. These are not easy.
Nobody said government was easy.
And we really do appreciate you being here tonight, and we've got a lot of work ahead of us.
Yep.
For everybody involved.
Yeah, no kidding.
So thank you.
Thank you.
We're not
Chair
done
White,
yet.
I don't know how we make an appropriate request to the parties that need to get together to do this. I hope we can maybe Janine, you might help us to gather that together. I think that's an important thing that we do tonight, though, is to be united in pushing this forward and getting the parties together to do this. What did you call it? University overlay?
University Neighborhood Overlay Zone.
Yeah, or whatever it ends up being called. But hopefully we
Yes,
might.
unfortunately, we don't have the mayor or Mr. Johnson here, and I'm not sure Mr. Louder
If you're
willing to
empowered.
commit, but I think we have had some discussion with the mayor about this, and I think they were okay going forward. And so I will work with Glenn and Mark and whoever he wants and from his
If the
people
recorder
to-
can just make sure that gets recorded in the minutes that we have asked for
Sure
that,
happens.
and
Thank
that
you.
would be great.
That'd be great.
I don't know if we want to put our ayes and nays to that one or not.
I think it's.
I think it's just, it was part of my vote that we did.
Okay, great, fabulous. Let's move forward then.
All right. Next on our agenda is public comments. This is an opportunity to address the council regarding any concerns or ideas on any topic. All right, seeing no movement, comments?
Oh, there's movement.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Nope, you're fine, I just didn't, you've been standing out there, I was like, I didn't know
I
if
know
you're
this
coming.
was weird, and I guess my only question was, because of the one recusal was not here, then we ended up with an even number. There's nothing in your guidelines or rules that says what procedure you would take in that case or not.
We explored it all. You heard
Okay.
it.
I'll trust you. Thank you.
I'm grateful for, obviously, the decision that the council came to, and I'm grateful for your time and consideration deeply. And I just want to reiterate our cooperation with the neighborhood having this passed, that we are still going to do everything in our power to make this as least intrusive on the neighborhood in terms of the construction and in terms of our requirements and our standards for the housing. I just want that to be clear that we're totally committed to that. Thanks.
Virginia Hernandez Reza, 2427 Jefferson Avenue. Okay, if I'm right, this is an opportunity to address the council regarding concerns or ideas on any topic.
Correct.
All right. Okay, the reason why I come was because the council put out there, I heard them 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, and I pulled up the papers on council rules of procedure and council terms. I did pull up that information. That was excellent. But this kind of information should be distributed or given out to the public, because people that I interact with have no idea how the council is supposed to operate. Now, that being said, oh, and I also want to say that I feel very comfortable being in the chambers. We began in the chambers on 25th when Mayor Godfrey was there. That's when we were there constantly in the chambers. So I feel that, and then here, been here all the time, so I feel really comfortable being in the chambers. But, of course, since that time to this time, there's been different council people and a different mayor. Now, I just want to say that my question here back to the council rules of procedure and council norms is this. I studied it, and we will go into more depth in that to get this information out to the people I interact with. We don't know what it's about. So my question here, I'd like my council people here, all of you or somebody, I can email you or you can email me back. I will present this to our meetings we have been having, not public meetings. I think I approached this question once when Mr. Cook was here, is that this is a troubling place right now. Does the council understand what nonpartisan body government means? That's question number one, this council. The previous one, when you were, the new ones were, we asked that. Do you know what it's supposed to be a bipartisan council? Okay, so, but the question is, are you all fully aware of that, especially your new ones? Because the reason we're saying that, I'm saying that, is because there has been some problems in the past, and it was that we saw other council people wearing different hats. And they would go, and I'm not saying you, but this is what our concerns is. They would go to these agendas or to these meetings saying they were council people, but they were not really there for that reason. So the people got a mixed perception. Are they Democrats or are they Republicans? Okay, that being said, is that the reason why it's an issue now, because at Weber State University, your president was called on the carpet with that in the newspaper and also with the legislator. He was there. We thought, or it was a misunderstanding,
Thanks, Virginia. Your time is up. Thank you.
I know, just one more. The problem was that the president there was being questioned, was he doing a lot of Democrat issues? And of course, they took it to the Attorney General and so forth.
Yes.
I would like that to be answered some way, somehow. Thank you. And you did an excellent job now presenting with the Weber State College.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. Thanks for sticking around, actually. Anybody else?
Sorry.
Comments?
Everybody's tired.
Yeah.
Comments from the mayor or?
Representative.
I heard the representative. I normally say nothing at this time, but I would like to take time to echo what the mayor said and say how proud we are of how well Lisa Stout and Camille Cook represent the city and our finances. I think they do an outstanding job.
Comments from the council members?
Chair White, I would love to say a couple of things. These things are kind of icky and sticky sometimes, and I appreciate my colleagues and your heartfelt beliefs on these issues. I hope that everybody's okay. You know, I think we probably are, but mostly I want to say about the Planning Commission's process. I really don't have, though I didn't agree with what we got, I really don't think they did anything wrong. I think this one was uniquely, I don't know what it was. It just was, the way it came to us was just kind of bad. And it wasn't anybody's fault, it just happened. And I also want to say to the developer, we wish you the very best on your project. And we hope that it is hugely successful for you, and that that it all works out. That's an important thing. If you're successful and happy, and you have demonstrated already that you're listening to the neighbors and trying to mitigate the concerns that they have, and I very much appreciate that. That's one of the successful attributes of of successful development. But anyway, I just, I do feel a little bit bad that it got kind of contentious for a while, so. But
I think that's our role.
I think so too, and that's kind of where I certainly don't disparage anybody for their heartfelt beliefs and concerns, so. But you know what? I just love the council, I love government. It's it might be kind of ugly sometimes, but it's nice that we can go forward. That's enough.
Yeah, and I want to say something too. I think it was, I will be honest, none of us came in here tonight. I don't think any of us came in here tonight having a yay or nay. I think we listened to everybody that got up here, and we had strong opinions, I'm sure, coming in here, but I think to your point that we did listen, and we do listen to the neighbors, and we were getting emails even this afternoon, so I appreciate all the feedback. So.
That the developer would be able to work with the community there, I think that's important for us to develop a strong project. And Greg, thank you for presenting it. And Lisa, she does explain it so we can all understand the budget, and we appreciate the staff that we have there. So, but I thank all our not only our council staff, but our administration, but also our council members. This is what we need to do to talk about it and discuss it. So we're not all perfect, I guess.
Chair White, if I can just make the comment that, Vice Chair Heyer was right. Sometimes it's not pretty. Sometimes it's difficult and messy along the way a little bit. That was just the reality of tonight, and I don't blame any single person or any entity or body for this. I just think this is added rationale as to why we need to move forward in a comprehensive manner. And I didn't get everything I wanted tonight, and I'm okay with that. I think that this council, and I'm very proud of this council, that we do disagree. We are not disagreeable. That we will move beyond this vote as one council again, and will be intact to make the next decision. And today we were faced with making a hard decision. It was messy. I really did not know where I was going to go with it tonight, and I was hoping for some, in grand enlightenment along the way. And I could tell throughout the night that regardless of how this was going to go, I was going to have a little bit of heartburn here and there. And that's just the nature of the role. I regret that we can't make everybody happy. That's just not the way the world works. But the one thing that I did get, and I think we all got, that we all wanted, was a bigger vision for the future. And I think tonight should be a show to you, Weber State and Brad Morrison, and to your colleagues, that this body, I think this city will be ready to work. It's time we roll up our sleeves. We got work to do. And to the developers, I do also wish you best of luck. I really do, and appreciate your remarkable efforts to mitigate concerns, and I really do hope that you continue to do so. I believe that you will, and you also have work to do, and so thank you.
Okay.
Motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's a wrap.